for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you so much for joining us in our meeting today. I do want to acknowledge that it is the 82nd anniversary of Pearl Harbor Day, which brought us into the Second World War, and I want to acknowledge one of my most outstanding professors at the University of Oregon, Professor Doles. I don't know if anybody in the room had him, but he was actually at Pearl Harbor that day. I believe he was 17, and an amazing, inspiring Far East professor. So anyway, there are a lot of the people that served in World War II are now in the 100-year age, and apparently, a lot of them are going to Pearl Harbor today that can, and that's really that's good to hear that their sacrifices are being acknowledged.
Yeah.
We have
I would just say personally, for me as an individual, without the entry of the United States into the Pacific Theater in World War II, my parents would not have survived the Japanese invasion of China. So I especially appreciate all the veterans who served in the Pacific Theater during World War II.
Okay, Rondo, you wanted to make some public comments this morning?
Good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
This is my first time talking to you since the elections, and congratulations to both of you. I just want to simply ask a question this morning. It's hard for me to do anything simple. I would like to hear from each of you at your own leisure your vision of what our nonpartisan county commission will look like. Thank you very much for your service.
Thank you, Rondo. You used your 3 minutes very quickly. Is there anyone else on Zoom that wants to speak? Are there any raised hands? No? Okay. And we do have citizen input that I want to acknowledge. We have a letter in regards to keeping Worrell Park intact. And we have a message from Mr. Piper, who is supporting psilocybin treatments here in Destination Resorts. So that actually, testimony for that closed last Friday at 4 p.m. for our permanent record, but he did send that letter in. Anything?
I'd just like to respond to Ron's question by saying that the nonpartisan commissioner ballot measure, Measure 9-148, passed in Deschutes County by an overwhelming majority, over 20% margin. And I am very much looking forward to seeing how our county implements Measure 9-148 in the coming months, because they essentially, that ballot measure ordered that by 2023 we figure out what we're doing about that, and we implement the will of the people. Not quite sure what it'll look like yet, but that's the direction.
Great. And Rondo, I believe we'll be having coffee, so at some later date. So thank you. We do have a consent agenda.
I will move approval of the consent agenda in a minute, but before that, I would just like to thank Judy Trigo, who happens to be here. That's one of our consent agenda items, for serving on our budget committee. And with that, I will move approval of the consent agenda.
And I will second it.
Thank you, Commissioner DeBonne. Further discussion, Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay, we have action item number 6. Lee, my first question to you is, are we going to need two motions today? Reading the recommended motion,
So Lee Randall, Facilities Director. I'll let Kim weigh in as well, but in my view, no, just one motion. The challenge with doing two amendments was making sure that we included the First Amendment, because this Second Amendment amends not only the original contract, it also amends the First Amendment to the contract, and then the Second Amendment captures the final cost of both amendments. So in my view, I believe it should be one motion, but I do agree it was a little cumbersome, and Kim and I worked together very closely to get that wording correct. I'll defer to.
No, that's correct, just one motion.
okay, so this is incorrectly written then. It says, and also amending. So which it should say included the amended that had already happened. Is that what you're saying?
The First Amendment was already amended, correct, but this amendment incorporates the First Amendment and the original contract.
Okay. Okay, just wanted to make sure. All right, sorry, Lee, go ahead.
So first, I'll start with, we have a good group of folks here today for this SunWest Builders Guaranteed Maximum Price Amendment number 2 for our North County campus in Redmond. Online, we have Sarah Crosswhite with 911 and Sean Clifford with Pinnacle Architecture, and then I'll let the folks here with me today introduce themselves as well.
Good morning, Commissioners. Janice Garceau, Director of Health Services.
I'm apparently not trained apparently with this, but Adam Bowles, SunWest Builders.
So about 6 weeks ago, we were before you with amendment number 1 for 244 Kingwood, which will be primarily behavioral health, and that project's underway. We're through demo and working into the next stages of the project with SunWest Builders. Today we have the second amendment for the second building, which is 236 Kingwood, and that building will have 911 dispatch on the second floor. The majority of the first floor will be a public health area, and then a shared county office space on the remainder of the first floor will house veteran services, IT support, and the clerk's office, as well as drop-in space for county use for folks that may have meetings in Redmond, and that space will be available. So the project, we outlined the cost. We had budgeted a little over $1.7 million for construction costs. As we've talked about before, we've experienced significant escalation in construction costs. We have our current estimate, which will become our guaranteed maximum price, has exceeded that, and each of the departments have found ways to contribute, including public health, veteran services, and then as well information technology, and then from our project contingency. 911 service district costs are being tracked separately for the 911 backup dispatch center, and they have budgeted this year for those costs as well. So a total project cost for this portion of the project at $2,619,271. With approval, if the board directs us to proceed, SunWest would be able to begin work very quickly. Our goal would be to begin to move that demo team from 244 and begin work on 236 Kingwood as early as next week, and then be able to move forward with that project. That's the summary of what we have before you this morning. Are there any questions?
Mr. Chang, do you have any questions?
No questions.
Mr. DeBone?
No questions, just acknowledging the escalation of costs. It's great to be able to see us put this package together, all the departments working together. And, you know, we've purchased the building, we're moving forward. So this is one of those classic situations of let's do it right and let us get it done so we can use those buildings.
I don't have any questions, but my comment would be, that this project is incredibly important to delivery of public health services, reliability of our 911 system, and a variety of other county services. And it's really exciting to hear that we can get to work as early as next week if we can move forward here today.
Sarah, I have a question for you. Did 911 pick up any of the original purchase price of that building for your proportional share?
Lee would actually know that. I only know what I budgeted. I'm not sure how it was placed. Do you know, Lee, if we did?
No, it was not. The original purchase was purchased outside of 911 funds. So the departments that will be occupying both buildings were not part of the original purchase contributions. So both 911, health services, and the various other departments that will be on the campus.
So the initial purchases were out of our kind of general fund capital reserves.
Correct.
If there's no further questions, I can make a motion. Move approval of board signature of document number 2022-957, amending Deschutes County contract number 2022-197, and also amending document number 2022-790 with SunWest Builders for the remodel of 236 Kingwood in Redmond.
Is that supposed to be
I'll
included in the
second it.
motion?
Is what's supposed to be included?
Amending the other document?
Yes, they both are being amended.
Okay. Okay, and you seconded it, Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes, I have.
Okay, I do have a further question. How much of an upcharge is this then from our original? Can you tell me a percentage?
I'll give you
Oh,
a
it's-
rough percentage, and then I'm happy to.
1.7 to 2.19, was that it?
Yeah, so about in the 6 to 7% range, 6 to 8% range, but I can get you.
Okay, it's less than 10%.
Yes, and I'm doing that math in my head as I sit here. But
I would know you would do it right, Lee. You went to the University of Denver. Okay, all right, that's, because I know we have inflation, but I am seeing some costs are going down.
And I will note quickly that, to your point, some of our costs did go down from our schematic design estimate in the spring. And so we are already, this reflects some of the potential softening of the construction market. So, and the hard work that SunWest has done in identifying opportunities for savings. So this does represent a decrease from our estimates from about 6 months ago.
Okay, thank you for saying that on the record. I appreciate that. Because from people I'm talking to, there's some softening going on. Okay, great. All right, so Commissioner Chang?
Yes?
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for joining us, Adam. Thanks.
Good to see you guys.
It'll be really exciting to see this project moving forward.
Okay, we have item number 7, downtown parking. Thank you. Lee?
Good morning, Commissioners. Lee Randall, Facilities Director. With us today, Nicholas Sparrows with HHPR and Joe Bestman with Transite Consulting. Going back to 2019, obviously we've been working on downtown parking solutions for a really long time, as we saw prior to the pandemic our capacity being strained. And then in 2019, prior to the pandemic, we did an internal study and concluded that on most days we were at or near our capacity. Moving forward, in January of 22, we received direction from the board to move forward with with proceeding to develop more capacity and related to Worrell Park. And as part of that project in our subsequent RFP and the scope of work with HHPR, we began with an analysis of our existing parking. We use staff surveys and some other tools that Joe and Nicholas will go into during our presentation today. And that brings us to today with the summary of what we've learned so far, and then some recommendations for some areas for further exploration. And really today, from today's meeting and providing this information to the board, it would be very helpful if the board were able to provide us direction related to those 5 areas. And we'll talk about those specifically, but they relate to reviewing our parking policy and signage, ensuring that we have accessible routes throughout the campus, looking at parking management and enforcement to ensure that the folks that are using the parking lot are here for county services or work in the buildings. Explore what other options we have to help reduce the demands on our parking through transportation demand management options. And then look to the future, knowing that at this point in time, from the slice in time of the work that the team has done, we recognize that we feel that we have the capacity to move forward with the courthouse expansion if we focus on those previous 4 areas. But we recognize that capacity won't be enough through the midterm. And so we would take the opportunity as part of identifying improvements that we can do currently without adding capacity, look at what do our capacity needs look like over the next 3 to 5 years, maybe up to 7 years, and begin working now with on some additional plans and analysis of that capacity and what those needs might look like. With that, I will turn it over to Nicholas and Joe and let them introduce themselves.
Could I just ask one question firstly? So when you say over the midterm, and then you said 3 to 5 or 7 years, do you mean the midterm is 3 to 5 or 7 years, or in the next 3 to 5 years we need to be thinking about the midterm, which is?
I think that's what we need to look carefully at. Not to dodge your question, but looking out 5 years, we would expect that we'll have additional capacity needs, just looking at the growth of the county and the growth of the departments that are on the downtown campus. That said, that's something that we would seek board direction for this team now that we have an engineering firm and traffic consultants under contract as a result of our RFP. It's within the scope of that RFP to pursue additional information about our capacity. So I think as we look at that, that's the information we'd want to nail down. Is it 5 years? Is it 7 years? What do those capacity numbers look like? What are our opportunities in partnering potentially with the City of Bend or other entities to help primarily address our needs, but are there synergies that we can find with other organizations as it relates to parking? So 3 to 5, 7 years, that's the information we would want to nail down through further analysis.
Okay, because I mean, with our construction schedule, I mean, we're not going to even need the courthouse parking for a couple years. So, I mean, saying we might need it in 3 years is basically saying when, as soon as the courthouse is open, we're going to need some additional capacity.
I'll let the team speak to that, because that is what we've looked at in this project. And 3 years is probably very much on the early side. Clearly, as a result of the work that they've done, we feel that there is sufficient capacity for when the courthouse opens.
Okay.
And we don't think that will be a challenge based on the information they've gathered and the work they've done. So it may be more accurate to say 5 to 7 years, with the opportunity now to look at what that looks like so that we can prepare ahead of time. And those might be measures. It may, we would, based on growth, we would think there will likely be capacity needs, but that's something we can look at more closely.
Thank you.
So, gentlemen?
All right. Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Nicholas Frios, HHPR. I'm a civil engineer here in Bend. As Lee mentioned, we are retained by the county to look at the campus parking and assess it and make some recommendations. To complete that effort, we partnered with local traffic engineer Joe Bestman and Transite Consulting. So I'm going to go through the first few slides, and then I'll pass it off to Joe. Okay, so we centered on a few primary questions. How is the campus parking currently functioning? Is there current capacity to support the planned courthouse expansion? And what opportunities exist to improve parking efficiencies? So as part of that effort, we did some information gathering. We reviewed the prior campus studies, and we did some outreach surveys to county staff. We also did an inventory of current parking to understand how the current parking is configured and what parking supply might be available. And then finally, we did some aerial drone surveys over the course of a couple midweek days just to see how the parking changed on an hour-by-hour basis, see where there might be some opportunities. The staff parking survey, this chart just shows how people are getting to work. The orange is Deschutes County employees. As you might expect, most people are driving alone. There is some work from home, and then there's just sprinkling of some of the other modes of transportation. The blue is from a study that CET did, or they pulled into their 2040 Transit Development Plan. And it's supposed to address county-wide employees over the age of 16. So it's just a comparison. You could see Deschutes County employees are pretty similar or generally, generally comparable to the county-wide survey. And then this is just a graphic showing the county-owned tax lots that we looked at north of Lafayette Avenue and then south of Lafayette Avenue. And with that, I'm going to pass it off to Joe. Thank you.
All right, good morning. So does this need to be green, or is this?
You're good.
Okay, perfect. Again, Joe Bestman, Transite Consulting. If I go to the next slide, Lee. So this graphic has a lot of detail, and I'll touch on that quickly. But in general, when you look at parking, we're going to take this in kind of a three-step process. The first step in this process is to figure out, what do we actually have? What parking is in the campus today? And I've been to this campus a number of times, and it was really eye-opening to walk around all these different parking lots and look at each individual stall and each sign and really figure out how this is configured. And a couple things I want to bring your attention to on this graphic that doesn't require reading anything on this graphic. On the margins, you see photos of all the different signs that we have. There's a number of different signs. Almost every parking stall on this campus has some type of sign designating who specifically is allowed to park there. All right, and the way these colors are dispersed on this map correspond to those signs, and you can see that these parking areas are dispersed throughout the campus. It's not like visitors go here and staff go there. It's really everything is kind of sprinkled all around, and I think that's an important point to note. Not only did we look at the on-site, the off-street parking supply, which the county really has a lot of control of, but we also looked at the adjacent on-street parking supply. And what this shows us is that we have a total of 788 parking stalls that we can utilize for this campus. Now, when you think about the on-street parking, though, those are really kind of the first come, first serve. Those aren't guaranteed to be used for county employees. And as you look at some of these stalls on the periphery, as Lee mentioned, we've got to figure out how to protect some of these so that they are used for campus employees, visitors, or whatnot. One other thing to note is, within the 788 parking supply, there's only 39 stalls that don't have some type of designation, some type of sign. I'm not going to tell you guys exactly where those are, because I'm going to save those for myself, but they are on this map. And again, it's pretty atypical to see such a small number of stalls that are available for general use. And the way to think about this is, the more you take a supply and divide it up and say, Joe, you can only park in this stall, the more difficult it is to really achieve good utilization of that parking supply. So that's the quick takeaway. Next slide. This next slide just goes through the southern portion of the campus, so Same comments here. Next slide, Lee. As Nicholas mentioned, we went through and got these drone shots throughout the day, and it provides a really good photo log of how this parking is used, not just on an overall campus supply, but by individual lots as well. And this is just a small sample of these photos showing the northern parking lot, and we were able to get multiple shots to get views underneath trees and around buildings, and really gave us a good snapshot that we can go back to and grab more data from. Next slide, Lee. And trying to answer this second question, okay, we know what our supply is now. Does the campus supply, is it adequate, right? And when you think of a typical industry standard, you have this supply, and you can't take that supply up to 100%. You don't want that last visitor looking for that very last stall on the campus and having to drive, to the maintenance. I mean, it just doesn't work that way. So typically, when you look at parking supply, 85% is what's considered full. And that accounts for people that might park on 2 stalls or pull trailers or whatever else is happening, plus accessible stalls that aren't available to everyone. What this is showing us, though, is that right now, today, our campus is operating at 75%. If 85% is the typical full, and that's not a hard and fast number we can't pass, but if 85% is full, we're at 75. So we have some room today. In fact, we have about 75 more stalls before we get to that 85% level, and 193 stalls total before we get to that point of being completely full. So this is really to answer the question of, do we have a supply issue? And the answer is no. So now we go and we say, okay, well, how's it being managed then? That's really the next part of this question. Next slide, Lee.
Question.
Oh,
Joe. So I was really glad that we were doing data collection over the last couple of months, and various kinds of data collection. There was a week in early November where people were coming to pay taxes. There were election workers out the wazoo upstairs, busily working away, and the parking lot was really full. So I'm wondering, in your data collection, if you have accounted for those kind of unique peak days that's actually predictable, because people pay their taxes the same time every year, and every 2 years we're going to have an election, and there's going to be a whole bunch of election workers upstairs. So are you, somewhere in your analysis, did you account for these potential peak days, and how do you deal with that?
Yeah, and I think when we get towards the end of this, you're gonna see that essentially within a parking system, you have a number of levers that we can pull. And I think the levers that we have access to right now are going to allow us to manage this parking quite well. But to answer your question very directly, we were supposed to be looking at that November condition during the election season. We had high winds and snow, and so it just wasn't conducive. We were concerned that it was going to kind of throw off our results a little bit, but we certainly recognize what happens in that time period.
Right. And I haven't been paying attention enough in detail to kind of identify whether there's other peak events like that throughout the year, or on a multi-year cycle. But I do want us to keep those in mind, and maybe that's a midterm concern as opposed to a near-term concern. But that's something we need to be aware of.
Yeah. No. Good comment. Great comment.
Jim, I actually want to make a question. I'm looking at the north parking lot because I've talked about in Vail, Colorado, and in Aspen, Colorado, the government has built workforce housing. And so I've been told that using the north parking lot, if we did 2 levels of parking, and then we could actually do 4 levels of condos on the top of that for workforce housing. And, that housing is always in such short supply here. I mean, employees, people that try and come and work at the hospital, nobody seems to be able to find workforce housing. So that's something that I really think is important, to be forward thinking, and I'm glad to know what you're saying. Our numbers wise, we're really not at critical positions, but thinking ahead, okay, so it says there's like 196 spots in that north parking lot. I think that includes the parking at the end next to the building. the medical building there.
Yes, it does.
So, but I mean, if we could do something in that parking lot, 2 levels, and then do condos.
What?
How many condos could we build? That's my question.
I'm glad you're asking that question with this slide up, because I probably should have mentioned this. This shows us the parking demand throughout the day, and this is very typical of a government office building. You're going to see that peak right around 11 o'clock in the morning. You're going to see the drop at noon. People trickle back to work, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, it starts to get back, and then it tapers off by 4 and 5 o'clock. If you look at a residential profile, like a workforce housing, it's the opposite. It's really that overnight is the peak demands for a residential use. It's that midnight to 4 a.m. During the day, that parking is minimal. Now, you're in the downtown core. There's a lot of opportunities for walking, biking. There's a lot of strategies and tools you can employ beyond that. But I think that type of use would be very compatible with this profile, and goes back to the management comment that Lee had mentioned earlier. There's opportunities. Just because we're full at 11 doesn't mean we're not empty when the downtown area is getting full. And we're seeing those residential pressures, not just within the campus, but on the periphery. So that's a really good comment.
Well, we did offer this parking lot, I believe, in like summer of 2019, when downtown was doing all those events and they block off the streets, and then it's actually not that far to walk. Or we'd had a little shuttle bus or something, but we actually, we have so many spots here, and it really was compatible with that use during, the weekends and things.
Yep.
So I'm just like going, okay, how many condos could we build, because we need workforce housing? I mean, oh my gosh, do we not see that everywhere we go? We hear that from so many businesses. They cannot, and even in the county, when we want to hire someone and they try and find someplace to live in Bend, and they can't find anything. So I'm shocked that Colorado's that far ahead of us.
We can definitely explore those opportunities. Lee's already brought it up, so we're
Good. I know there was a big dollar amount on it, but sometimes you have to think ahead. What is the value of spending that money? What is the real value for our whole community? So thank you.
And one of the things that I believe we learned when we were looking at the 218 spot 3-story parking structure over here was that mixing mediums, having parking and office or residential, it makes each part more expensive. So instead of, like parking spots cost this much if it's just a straight multi-story parking building. Residential costs this much if it's a straight residential building, but when you mix the two structurally, it makes each one cost more. Is that accurate? Or
that's not my area of expertise, but I believe you.
I mean, is that one of the things we learned?
That's when we did the pricing model for that option, we were looking at 5 stories, and we had some options that showed 1 or 2 stories of housing. And essentially what came out of that is that the least expensive way to build just parking would be with precast concrete, which isn't conducive to housing because of plumbing chases and all of those compartments. So when you do mix them, there are residential or there are private development that mixes parking and housing, but that can be it can be a challenge. It can pencil out, in the private world when they look at the cost of housing versus parking and combining the two and the need for parking. It typically, based on the cost estimates that we did, it typically costs more to combine them or less expensive to focus on just one use. It's not to say it can't be done. It can certainly be done, and there are ways to find cost efficiencies in doing it.
I mean, and the other really important thing for us to think about is if we're building 50 or 100 units of housing in that parking lot, unless those people work here or in downtown, how many parking spots do we need to provide for the residential development? And does that basically end up canceling out any parking gains that we would get out of building
And I think
a multi-story parking structure?
One thing that we can look at if we were to explore that concept would be, what are our opportunities to do workforce housing but maybe do it separate from a parking project? And are there opportunities on other county-owned property. We can certainly look at stuff that's adjacent to the downtown campus and look for an opportunity to combine housing and parking. And we could compare that to other opportunities to pursue both of them separately and just do an analysis and come back to the board with information on what each of those opportunities look like.
I think that's a great idea, Lee. I do know that on the west side of the Fourth, they would have mountain views. So they could, that's worth something. I know it might be a lot of money, but.
And I do want to take this opportunity, Henry Alaman with OTEC CPM is with us. He's our owner's rep on the kind of the campus-wide downtown parking analysis. So he's been helping us put together this information as well. So Henry is with us as well. And I'll turn it back over to Joe.
I'll jump to the next slide. All right, so we looked at our overall supply. That was kind of step one. We looked at whether that supply was adequate. That was step two. And now we're trying to figure out, okay, well, how are these internal allocations being managed? And if you look at the overall supply, there's really 4 categories that make up the bulk of the parking, 84%. And that's your permit, your fleet parking, your general parking, and your visitor-only parking. The rest of it's about 100 or so stalls, and I think there's some opportunities within that as well. But just to focus on this lion's share of it, I think is how you move the needle the most. All right, Lee? So if we look at these different categories, what we find is the general unrestricted parking that's available is getting pretty full. And again, this is comprised a lot of your on-street parking. So it's not even necessarily just county campus uses. Your permit parking, your staff, it's getting pretty full as well, and your visitor parking has room, and your fleet parking is a little bit less than full. But I want to pause there because that the one category, the fleet parking, is the one category that's not coming onto campus and leaving. That's the category that's not moving. So when you look at fleet parking and you look at this during this 11 o'clock peak hour, what we're saying is we have 105 fleet vehicles that are taking up stalls that probably haven't moved that day or during this peak time period. So there's another big lever that we have the opportunity to pull on and open up different supply options. And so from this, we really get to these findings to say we have some room, and I understand there's time periods there's time periods that are busier than others. This is a typical fall time period that we're looking at here. It's certainly not the peak, but there's room, and there's a lot more room within these levers that we can pull on to provide even more parking supply. So from this work, we don't see any need to go and make any major modifications to Worrell Park. Worrell Wayside, that we have enough supply within our campus to work with the courthouse and to meet the current needs. But I do want to make sure the word significant is highlighted here because I still think there's some pretty good opportunities within Worrell Park. We've looked at this parking supply to say, yeah, there's stalls, but it doesn't mean you might not have to park on one end of the campus to walk to the other end. And as you guys know, those crossings aren't great, those sidewalks aren't great, they're not comfortable. So there's certainly opportunities, along Lafayette and other places to improve those walking routes and improve those street crossings, that accessibility, so that you can get from the parking to your destination. I think the parking allocations are something we really want to look at. How do we simplify all this signage, bring it down to 2 or 3 categories of parking, so it's a lot more fluid and it can flex better than it does today. And I think overall there's opportunities to improve efficiency just by trying to consolidate the parking types into various areas as much as practical. And so I think Lee already went through our recommended next steps of really looking at, what are our signs saying? And it was actually informational for me. I'd seen all these permit parking only, violators will be towed signs, and I thought, I can't park there. And Lee clarified for me, that's intended to be, this is where staff park in the back, but visitors can park here, and we're not gonna tow. I had no idea. So I think just clarifying what's on these signs, where these signs are, how we're managing this system is really a key next step. And I think there's some real opportunities in here too, just in terms of addressing how you interface with your neighbors. Because again, overnight hours, off-peak hours, there's a lot of supply available, and you are right next to the downtown. And there is a lot of residential coming in right around the periphery of this campus. So I think there's some real opportunities in front of you. So I'll stop there and open it up for any questions.
I'm just looking at the North Fleet lot, which is only 52 spots, and yet you said it's 148 total. So the rest, I see where there's one row, I know, you always see all the state cars parked next to the building on the east side. I'm wondering where else are fleet parking that make up, that 90-some?
Yeah, I can touch on that. So we also have a fleet lot near the facilities warehouse that's shared with community development, IT, property management.
Over there?
Facilities.
Okay.
We have some fleet spots that are designated at a few other 3 or 4 apiece. There's some fleet parking around the Deschutes County Downtown Clinic and the Annex/DCDC building for health services. There are 4 or 5 spaces in the Wall Street lot, and then we have some spaces that are specific to security at the courthouse. So that's kind of, in broad terms, what makes up the rest of those numbers.
Okay, I see the 27 in the South Fleet area.
We can give you these graphics in much, much higher resolution so you can actually read them.
Oh, it's working really well.
Back to the, one of your slides showed for visitor parking, we're already over 85%. Am I getting that right?
No, the visitor parking still had some room. I think that was around 60%. And that was slide 11, Lee. It was 69 of 102 stalls during that 11 o'clock time period.
Okay, got it. And so it was the general that was already over 90.
Yes, the generals.
Already over 85%. So what I was, my concern was, the whole catalyst for this look is the courthouse expansion. So if we're talking about X number of additional jurors showing up on Monday every other week, where does that, are those are classified as visitors or general?
That would be visitors. The general parking is open for anybody, so staff can park there now. People outside the campus can park in those stalls. You have no restrictions on those whatsoever.
Actually, I will comment on that. The state court provides a parking pass to jurors, so they are able to park in our permit parking clearly. And then we also have a kind of first come, first serve arrangement with the city of Bend for their Newport lot, and typically specifically for jurors who have the parking pass provided by the court. And that parking, typically there are available spaces there. And so it's something that we didn't include in this analysis because it's specific to our campus. But probably when we develop more specific recommendations going forward, we would take a look at, what is that current opportunity of partnering with the city. We'll have a conversation with them about how that might carry on into the future as well.
Okay.
It might be interesting to see how that jury time frame works too. I'm on jury duty last week and this week. I haven't been called yet, but
You will.
but they now have online jury orientation, so I didn't even need to come in. And then they have a morning orientation at 9 and an afternoon at 2, so it kind of avoids that peak time at 11 o'clock. So,
But then when they call everyone in, because I just served on jury duty last fall, and they had I think it wasn't on a Monday though. We had to go in, I think be there by 8 or something, 8:30. But it was a Tuesday.
Called in to
Right.
serve. Okay.
Yeah.
We were called in, and yes.
Which is less of a pulse than that first day of the cycle when everybody used to come in for orientation. So that's helpful to understand. Okay, but I mean, looking at that slide, basically, if jurors are issued permits, they would sort of be spread across the permit and visitor.
Yes,
And that's what we
columns right now.
We work with the jury coordinator to message that they're welcome to park in permit parking. We prefer that they park in permit parking because that's typically where we have some capacity through the day. But they also, typically, you may see jurors parking in visitor parking as well. Any other questions at this point?
Chair,
Yes, Nick.
if I can just see if Commissioner DeBonne has any questions.
Yes, I
We don't
was
see
thinking
him.
about that too. Does he have any, is Commissioner DeBonne on? Does he want to say something? Stephanie?
I am here. Yes, I'm here.
Yes.
And again, it goes all the way back to the beginning of this. We're going to build so many square feet of new developed space in downtown Bend. And back in the day, just last year, when you do that, you're required by code to build X amount of parking spots. So now we're just kind of working our way back from that. And I'm just kind of looking at the big picture here. But the future is bright with, commuting options or, the Uber and Lyft possibly, just different ways that people are going to get around. Maybe the future is going to be different. It's exciting to know that, we could proceed with this big development in downtown and not have to spend a lot of money on parking. So I'm just kind of digesting the big picture here from, our choice that I supported for Worrell Park was to make a beautiful park with a little bit smaller edges and add some parking spaces, and sure gained a life of its own in the last year or two. So thank you very much for doing this analysis and understanding that we could manage our existing parking a little bit better. It's good to hear that the jury system is providing that flexibility where not everybody has to show up on that Monday and fill the room. Because I've met them out there on the side of our building asking, "Can I park here? I'm kind of panicked. I got to get into jury duty." So I always feel bad for those folks. So, but thank you for the analysis, and let's build that building that we're planning on building and manage the parking.
Thanks. So,
I did have a couple more questions. First off, the fleet parking, like what, you mentioned that as sort of an opportunity area. Like, what does that look like? What are some of the ways that fleet parking could be managed differently to, to free up space? I mean, it kind of looks like we have more fleet parking spaces than we need for our fleet. So, I mean, maybe, is that just kind of like shrinking the fleet parking areas a little bit, or is there other things we can do?
Well, I think what you can do immediately near term is you could look at not having it where you could double park fleet vehicles. You could have it where, if you have a fleet of inspector vehicles, for example, the first inspector walks out, they take the first vehicle in line, they drive off. You can get a lot more efficient use of fleet vehicles through that type of approach. Secondly, it's looking at how do you right size that fleet? How do you make sure there's sharing opportunities between different departments for those fleet vehicles? And then it's making sure that your fleet vehicles, are parked in the appropriate spots, not necessarily taking up the most convenient spots unless that's really part of their function and necessary, as I understand some of these are. But it's that prioritization, I guess, is really the point. It's, you're prioritizing visitors, then staff, and lastly, fleet.
Thank you.
And I was the commissioner that never wanted to lose Worrell Park. So thank you so much. It's been there for 75,000 years, and I think it brings a real rustic beauty to Bend. And I'm really happy that we can do some other things.
Thanks.
I think to close, if the commission were willing to do so, it would be great if you were able, on those 5 points that we provided for further explanation, provide clear direction in terms of possibly a motion, but to direct us to through the rest of the scope of HAPR's contract to pursue further analysis of those 5 areas.
So I'll make some comments down that line. I do have that slide right here in front of me. So campus signage review to ensure messaging is clear and intuitive. We definitely, the smorgasbord of signs is kind of interesting how many different signs are there. I'm sure we can clean up the operation of what people see when they pull into our parking lots to start. Wayfinding for folks to be able to say, okay, I am jury duty. Jury duty is that one surge event that I think of. maybe there's a way to really help them color coding or just routes where people are allowed to look for parking. Because also we're in the flow of the traffic system. You get on the, Wall Street, you take a right in, but then if you can't find a spot, you got to go back out and go around a few blocks. So wayfinding in the bigger picture sure could be valuable. So, Lee, are you looking for us to vote on this or just provide comments and direction?
I would defer maybe to Nick in terms of how that might look, but comments and direction would be very helpful, sure.
I can also defer to Kim, but I don't know that they need a vote. It's really direction on, are we going to continue to explore these 5 options, because we're not seeking a specific decision today.
As I drove in this morning on Lafayette, I thought, oh my gosh, it's already so bumpy, and we haven't even really hit winter yet. What's it going to look like if we get a lot of snow? But that's not your problem, is it, Lee? Is that the city?
Fortunately, that particular one is not mine.
I know. See, I knew I could mention that. Well, I would really appreciate if you would look into other land where we could do workforce housing and do an option analysis. I'm like going, okay, what are the dimensions? How many could we do? And what would that take out if we did 2 rows? And what does it looks like about maybe 150 parking spots in each level? So, how many condos could you build? And what kind of a damage would it do to the parking needs? And yet, to me, workforce housing, gosh, have I not been listening to that for 4 years? And, we've got that ADU bill that's being held up. But within the city, I just see so many spots where they still say they are short of employee places to live. It's a never-ending issue here, and it seems to be only getting worse.
I'll come back to the parking in a minute, but since we're steering over to workforce housing, I guess I'd like to share something that's come to my attention that I think is actually pretty interesting, which is that Core Community Land Trust is actually working partnerships with employers now, where essentially an employer is chipping in $50,000 or something like that to the development of a unit, one of Core's cottages, and then that employees gets bumped to the front of the line in terms of having an opportunity to purchase one of those affordable homeownership opportunities, and that's. We could imagine trying to build workforce housing ourselves. The county is not it's not a developer and builder. So it's a lot of our expertise is in building more like office and commercial type space rather than residential type space. But those kinds of partnerships with entities that do develop housing, it sounds like to me like a real opportunity for us to address some of that workforce housing need in a way that we're not taking on a whole project that is not necessarily in our immediately in our wheelhouse. Okay, so coming back to the parking. I would say that these, like looking on this list of 5 items, the first 4 all seem pretty clear and make sense to me, and are things that, traffic engineers and facilities directors and HR people can sort out for us. The 5th one is the one that seems a little bit more open-ended. What if we're assessing future growth needs and what our options are. I mean, that could be very wide. It could be very broad. I mean, we could go back to talking about multi-story parking structures with apartments or office space on top, or we could continue talking about working around the edges of Worrell Park. I mean, there's a lot of things that could be included in that. So that seems like maybe what it would be good to have the board give a little bit more specific direction to. And
You know, we could come back to the board in a few weeks with that fleshed out a little more clearly, so that to give you some opportunities for some specific things to think about, if that would be helpful. We could move forward with the first 4, and then probably just give a better sense of what that 5th one may look like, in order for the board to give it some thought.
For me, definitely, I wouldn't be prepared to give you a list of what I think should be under bullet number 5 at this point, but up to my fellow commissioners.
And I know we've discussed this in the past about the fleet going out to the road department where we have all that extra space. But that is, if we were in a critical situation, that could, moving those 148 vehicles could be, in an emergency, an option? We're not we have a lot of room out there, do we not?
Well, one thing that we found through the planning process for road department, we've just completed working through a long-term plan, is that when you drive by, it looks like there's a lot of space. When you are actually inside the fence and looking at how that space is utilized when they're coming and going, and with the large and heavy equipment, in talking with Chris Doty, there really isn't an opportunity for large-scale parking in their space, given how it's used with moving heavy equipment through and how they operate. And there's some other challenges to off-site fleet parking. I think that's why what we came away with was, how do we just tighten it up? How do we better utilize what we have? Are there some smaller scale, lower hanging fruit options that we can take advantage of as it relates to fleet, as opposed to initiating a kind of, either a shuttle with folks taking work time to go get vehicles, or the other ways to envision off-site fleet parking. Joe's identified some good opportunities that we can explore, and I think as we move forward, we would come up with some sketches, some diagrams, some operational suggestions. We would vet that through the various departments on how we could better use fleet.
Yeah, the idea of asking veteran services, health services workers, code enforcement, code compliance staff, assessors, to ask them to drive out to roads to pick up a vehicle to go to Redmond is, to me, that would consume so much staff time in driving, that then we'd probably be at a point where we actually had to add more staff to be able to make up for the lost productivity of our workforce. And I just don't think that's a good idea. I would much rather us consider something like sending vehicles home with staff, if we know that X person is going to be using that vehicle all day tomorrow. Just have them take it home and economize on a parking spot that way. But the idea of making county staff drive across town, to be able to go to various parts of the county, I just don't think that's a good idea.
So just filling in here, I agree that that bullet point 5 is kind of a project in its own that we can all look at and possibly set more direction. So the starting point for exploring transportation demand management and options and strategies is a big picture item for all of us. So I support let's bring that back, maybe by itself, or and it doesn't have to be a board meeting. It's just kind of a community conversation about what does that really look like. We do have our transportation system, COIC with some buses and transportation, demand management, what we can do at, staffing levels or timing or whatever it is. So I do see that separation of those 4 bullet items from the last one. And, we do need, all options need to be discussed at this point also.
I would like to say that I see where the city of Bend is going down on parking, but honestly, I think that can be very frustrating for people when we are trying to find a parking spot, and there are, there's 4 feet of snow out there, or whatever. And remember when downtown gets to be a mess and they haven't cleared out the snow and you can't park? So I really don't want the county to be a burden on the lack of parking, because we are part of the downtown. I think that's really important. When you don't allocate enough parking spots and you're building an apartment building with 48 units in it and you're only allocating 48 spots, or you're not allocating any, and it makes for people that are very frustrated. So like to reduce the frustration as much as possible from our standpoint.
The future scenario that really concerns me is that housing is becoming much less available and much harder to afford in our community, and particularly within Bend. And to me, that raises a red flag about the concern that even more employees will be committed to driving to downtown campus in the future, because if you're making a county salary, the possibility of moving here, becoming a county employee, making a county salary, and being able to buy a house in Bend is it's getting more and more difficult. So that is something I do think we need to account for as we look forward, unless we're doing some really innovative things in terms of employee housing, near public transit, near walking routes, near bike trails and things like that. That's something that we have to consider, is that as county staff turns over and people who've been with us for 20 years and who bought a house when it was reasonable to do so in Bend, close to downtown campus, those employees are going away over time. The other commissioners have each had a chance to mention Worrell Park, so I'll just make a couple of comments. I arrived here in office in 2021. The best information that we had was a 2019 parking analysis, which showed that we were really strained in terms of parking at that moment. There's tremendous concern about the use of any portion of Worrell Park for parking, and the Board of Commissioners heard people. We heard those concerns and understand very clearly that there are a lot of people who don't want any changes, even tiny little changes to Worrell Park. And that encouraged us to take this second look. The fact that we did another parking analysis barely 2 years after the first one was done, I hope that people understand is a signal of our hearing people's concerns and taking those very seriously into account. I'm personally glad that at this point in time that we do not have to build any additional parking, both to address the concerns of people who don't want to see any changes at Worrell Park, and frankly because this, which was our cheapest option that we explored for additional parking, was $2.5 million that we don't have, and which we would have to pile on top of the borrowing that we're going to be discussing in a couple of minutes for the courthouse. I may be even more happy that we don't have to build any additional parking because of those fiscal concerns than for other concerns at this point. But it's all it's a win-win in a lot of ways, in my opinion, and so I'm glad that we can proceed with these four bullets and flesh out that fifth to address our parking needs moving forward.
Great. Thank you so much for joining us. Okay, we're at item number 8. Lee, I believe you're on again. It's your lucky morning.
Let me sort through my presentation materials here quickly. We have quite a few people here, I believe, in person. One more chair. All right, thank you. So our next agenda item is related to the courthouse expansion and providing an update to the Board of Commissioners. Again, Lee Randall with the Facilities Department, and I will introduce the folks that we have with us, and then as well, when we get to their portion of the presentation, I'll let them introduce themselves for the record. So we have Presiding Judge Ashby with us, Sergeant Chris Gibson from Court Security, and Wayne Powderly with Cumming Group, Mike Gorman with LRS, our trial court administrator, Angie Curtis, and John Williamson with Pence Construction. And we also have joining us online Jerry Mulrooney with Cumming Group, our owner's rep for the project. I will give a brief introduction and then turn it over to the team to take you through the update that we provided in the packet. We began work really this time last year with selecting owners group to help represent us in the process throughout the project. We added LRS architects along with a national courtroom consultant through the winter last year. Then Pence Contractors joined us through a CMGC process, and we began work in June with programming. We have a core group of stakeholders represented here, and as the project progresses, we'll be expanding that to other folks that have keen interest in the courthouse project. With that, I will turn it over to Wayne Powderly, and I will do my best to move the slides appropriately.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Wayne Powderly. I'm the Director of Project Management for Cumming Management Group. We are the owner's representative on this project. As Lee was saying, so, we've been working diligently over the past year on this project. And through this slide presentation, we're going to go through the project overview, progress to date, design progress with Mike Orman's input, and then we'll talk about the project budget with a couple of options, and then we'll talk next steps and then questions and discussions.
I just have a comment to make. I actually was standing somewhere at our dinner with the judges, I believe it was the end of October, and learned that they were no longer going to need our courtroom at the county fairgrounds because they did not need that for their capacity. And I just happened to hear that comment, and I was actually shocked because we added the 2 judges. They started, I believe, the 1st of February, something like that, working, and yet you didn't need that courtroom for your capacity. And so this project just seems like it has grown and grown and grown and grown, and yet I'm going, oh my gosh, you walked away from that room because you didn't need the capacity. So I just want you to know that I was really happy. I just happened to be standing at an interesting location that day. Yeah, we're up to, I'm looking at a letter that says we need $50 million now, and I'm going, but why don't we need that courtroom down at the fairgrounds? Because we don't need that capacity. So I don't know if something in the judicial system has changed, but it seems like they're working right now where they are. Anyway, I just wanted to make everyone aware of that. That's what's happened. And, how many more it took, 20 some years for us to get 2 more judges. we hadn't had a new judge since 2003. And we really needed 3, we get 2, and yet you don't need that capacity. So, anyway.
I mean, I've heard about the return of North Sister Building to us from the courts as well, and my understanding of the issue is just that that very, very, very large space was needed when a certain amount of social distancing or spacing was needed during the pandemic, and it's not that within the existing courthouse there aren't rooms that are big enough for that number of people, but not necessarily big enough for that number of people if you are trying to spread them 5 or more feet apart. Is that? I
can speak to it from a facility standpoint, and then if Judge Ashby or TCA and Curtis would like to contribute as well. For us, we specifically worked with the courts to provide that for social distancing and for bringing in large juror groups, and we're able to accomplish that in that space. From what we've been working with Jeff Hines with is to be able to return that space to them for a period of this year so they can use it more, more efficiently. And then we're also looking at likely needing to use that space again when we begin construction, because as construction starts up against the building, we're going to lose the use of some of the rooms along the south side of the building where the judges are currently using to do remote court and use other creative options for doing court. But I'll also defer to the judge.
Yes, commissioners. Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to address the commission today.
Oh, Judge Ashby, do you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, I'm sorry. Of course, Wells Ashby, presiding judge for Deschutes County. Thank you, Commissioner Adair. To your point, I want to support what Lee was saying. The thrust of getting out to the fairgrounds was to protect staff, to protect litigants, and really important to protect jurors, because our jurors range dramatically in age and health profile, and for constitutional considerations, the court has a very limited ability to restrict. We don't want to restrict participation to serve as jurors, and so we really had to seek. We had 2 things. We have to remain operational during a pandemic, and that requires felony jury trials, and that requires a lot of space. Certainly during peak pandemic, keeping people distanced, having the air purification out there, that facility was fantastic. One of the challenges certainly for us is, when we are operational out at the fairgrounds, it really stretches staff. We have to staff that with at least 1 tech. We have 2 techs. It's a different security profile for the sheriff. It's fantastic for a pandemic. It'll be great to have to know that we can use it and be successful with construction. And I'd say right now, maybe not 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag, but maybe 8.5 pounds in a 5-pound bag is what we have downtown. We have 2 new judges who have been fantastic in terms of their flexibility. We're really trying to, if a courtroom's open, hey, can this person use it this morning? And colleagues have been great that way. And one issue too, Commissioner, is one of the things that I think you'll see in the plan. If you look at the 2 courtrooms that are being proposed, there's 1 jury deliberation room. So trying to save space and square footage to say, would we really need 2 jury trials at the same time, or can we, have a family law or dependency case while we have a jury trial? And so, trying to be efficient with that space. Final thing too is, the courthouse of the future is still a very fluid concept post-pandemic. And as you folks know, Commissioner Chang said, hey, we're in the commercial space business, maybe more than the residential. Building for a future that doesn't exist can be tough. So we're trying to imagine what will court of the future look like. That's a conversation that our Chief Justice, Martha Walters, has been leading. We were down in Tahoe about a month and a half ago with the western states and having that regional conversation. So understand the question. That's why we use that space, and we're really trying to look at how can we be efficient with the ask. The number is big, and what is the future proofing to get what we need for this community. So kind of a long answer. Hope I addressed it.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll turn it back over to Wayne.
So we'll go to the next slide there, Lee, if you could, so the project overview. So the current scope of the project is to develop approximately 50,000 square feet, addition to the existing courthouse that was constructed in 1977. The new addition will consist of finished space for new courtrooms, jury assembly, hearing rooms, court security screening, administration, and secure parking and in-custody transport. Lee's already introduced the team, so don't need to do that again, but we have Lee with Deschutes, Facilities Director, Cumming Group, LRS Architects, and Pence Construction. I'll touch on progress to date here real quick, and then I'll hand it over to Mike. Over the past year, we've done lots of meetings, weekly OAC meetings. We've had stakeholders engagement tours. We've toured the Multnomah new courthouse downtown and also the East Multnomah County courthouse. Yesterday, we toured the Jefferson County courthouse. So lots of good lessons learned on those tours. And then also reaching out to all the stakeholders that are involved with this project, getting lots of great input from each one of those groups. We've had programming and design charrettes. We're now complete with the programming stage. And with your decision here today, that'll enable us to get on to the next stage, which is the schematic design.
Do you know when the Jefferson County Courthouse was finished? I have been there. I know the cost was $495, I believe, a square foot.
About a year and a half ago, John?
Closer to 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, 5 years.
5 year, okay, that's what I thought, but it was like 495,000 then, or 495 a square foot.
And then we've also worked closely with City of Bend, doing due diligence with City of Bend, just checking on traffic engineering regarding parking, street parking, obviously, that we talked about previously, and then also looking at Harriman Street, possibly redesign on Harriman on the east side of the new building. We also have a pre-app next week with the City of Bend, the formal pre-application, which will start the process with their input as well. And then through the reach out of each one of the stakeholder groups, we've, like I said, gained a lot of input, and LRS has taken all that input and come up with these guiding principles, which has steered us with this design that we have so far to date. With that, I'll pass it over to Mike, talk to more in detail on the design.
Okay. I'm Mike Gorman with LRS Architects. So we started out with, we talked about we had the guiding principles for the programming development of the project and stuff, and we kind of mentioned that before with you guys, and as well as trying to future-proof the project as much as possible. We don't have that much more land in the downtown campus. Going off-site someplace else to, if you outgrow the courthouse, gets very expensive. So we kind of looked at how do we future-proof this project. So we went through the programming analysis. We were gave a survey to each of the different departments, and then had meetings with them and talked through it. Our initial square footage that we came up with of needs of 65,000 square feet. Now, granted, in that was a 20-year projection. Looking forward, looking at staff growth, looking at population, just what do we need going forth? That wasn't adding any more courtrooms. That was just basically the courtrooms that we needed to do, and as well as the support spaces and staff that we needed. So that was 65,000. So we went through the process. It got honed down to about 59,000 square foot. And just for comparison, the existing courthouse right now, the 1977 and the 2003 addition on the two levels is basically 37,000 square feet, with a 14,000 square foot basement that used to be the jail, which is now kind of jury assembly and a lot of file storage, expensive file storage space. So in court design, there's three different elements that are very key in circulation. And these really can't intermix. You don't want them to intermix in 21st century courthouse design. One, public circulation, how the public gets around. Two, staff, and that includes the judges. We don't want the judges to have to be crossing paths with the public. Three, in custody. We want to keep them in custody. They're not crossing paths with the judge. They're not crossing paths with the public. So if you look at our current courthouse, all three of those don't work. You've got in custody going across the lobby, you got the public there, you got the judges have to go across. So we have these three different circulation paths, which add square footage to the building. We are proposing three vertical circulations. We have proposing two new public elevators to go up to service the public. We have a staff/judge elevator, which comes from the secure basement all the way up. And we also have the in custody, because we're proposing a new Sally Port that will hold 2 vehicles, the holding area, and we have vertical transportation for it that takes the in custody up through, so they don't cross paths. And with the 21st century courtroom design, you bring them up to a holding cell, a holding area between the courtrooms. So it gets more efficient for, obviously, court security, that they're right there, they can take the person, the in custody person, into the courtroom from there. So it adds some square footage and a challenge with a tight site, which we have a very tight site. So we are trying to maximize the square footage of that site. So in our proposal, our concept we have is we're looking at, redoing the entry lobby and making that secure. We're actually looking to bring that off street. So you're walking, instead of going up steps, we're going straight off the street into that lobby, going through security. Then you go to some steps, some stairs, and some elevators to get up. So a little bit of difference there. We have our secure garage, about 16 parking spaces that has access to that secure elevator going up for the judges. And we also have the new Sally Port, which will hold 2 vehicles. We'll hold 2 vehicles that the county has, which is the kind of Sprinter van types, which the current Sally Port won't support. So they can get in there, they can have a little bit more flexibility of when people are coming versus just one. We also have the holding cells downstairs and stuff. And from there, they can be taken up. And of course, we got the different separations, if it's a man or a woman or potentially a juvenile. We have all those different requirements and stuff. We get up to the main level, and that's where we looked at putting the court administration there and giving them to get everyone out of the old courthouse into that area and provide a public interaction area and stuff. And it's also set up for the later date. Step back. Then we go to the second floor, and that's where we have our new courtroom set. And we say a courtroom set, that is 2 courtrooms, and in the middle is where we have the holding cells with that vertical transportation for the in custody. And then the back of the courtrooms, it's where we have the judges' chambers and court administration support spaces, as well as the jury assembly. All in the back, so it's in the out of the public way. And then, of course, in the public side, we've got to have enough room for people to feel comfortable and to mull around and stuff. So we also propose doing the 3rd floor as a shell. And it's basically being designed so that you could take and put 2 more courtroom sets, another courtroom set, I should say, on that floor. You only have one option to build this building. You can't come back and say, well, let's add a floor. And so that's why one of our other options we're proposing is adding that 4th floor as a shell, kind of future-proofing your square footage and maximizing the long-term future of the downtown courthouse. And I think that's kind of about it. Anyone have any questions on that?
Any questions at this point related to the concept?
I don't understand enough about building to really be able to digest. You can't go back and build a 4th floor. Can you?
So in other words, if you went and say you build the parking level and 3 levels, you're not going to be able to come back at a later date without being extremely expensive to add a 4th floor. Partly because, one, we've got HVAC equipment on that 3rd floor roof that you can't remove. You're not going to, so it's kind of like you need to build what you need to build at the time that you build it.
Can you, not in a precise way or anything, but could you give me a sense of orders of magnitude? So we have estimates for what the difference between shelling out a 3rd floor and shelling out a 4th, just a 3rd floor, or shelling out a 3rd floor and a 4th floor is now. Mm-hmm. Can you give me a sense, if we were to go 3 floors and then try to come back and build the fourth floor later, like how much more expensive is that fourth floor?
Yes, John, thank you.
Yeah, great question. So I think when looking at building the building taller now, it's an economies of scale issue.
Right.
So a lot of efficiency with replicating as we go up. The trade personnel, the details, the teams are all on site, so there's a lot of economies of scale with that. When we looked at an analysis, today's information, arguably we're projecting maybe a 50% reduction in the cost of that floor of replicating that same square footage elsewhere because we already have footings and elevator systems and all those things going. So on day one, it's probably a 50% efficiency on the cost of that square footage, if that answers your question.
So it'll cost us half of what it would cost to come back and do it later.
Yes, exactly.
But later is a subjective term too, so there's a big difference also coming back in 5 years versus coming back in 10, 15, 20 years, obviously with escalation, as well as disruption. Yeah.
Right. If we just looked at what it would cost to build that fourth floor now versus putting a fourth floor on a adjacent building, we know this is at least roughly half the cost of what it would cost to do that to an already occupied, completed building.
But I want to remind you, it took us 20 years to get those additional judges. And this is the state of Oregon. They don't seem to fund judicial systems like they really should. It seems like, wow, we waited over 20 years with our population growth of 55%. And so talking about 5 years, to me, that's not realistic at all. You know, maybe, what do you think, in another 10 years we'll get another judge or two? I don't know, Judge. What do you? It's not a real, it seems like it's a lot of work to get judges here in this state.
Sure, I agree. I mean, the history is what the history is. I think, you know, there are a couple of things to consider. First of all, it was a community effort, certainly supported by the commission, and it was long overdue. You know, one of the things that we've considered, and obviously future-proofing, you know, that is, you know, such an issue for the commission. Anytime you're going to the commission, or I'm sorry, the legislature to get resources, to say it's an inexact science is probably putting too much certainty on it. But what we know is that Central Oregon is going to remain an attractive place to live, and the growth projections for Central Oregon are potent. And so, you know, we know a few things when we go back to the legislature. You know, what's important, that we have space, right? That's a huge consideration. You know, there are many other districts who have a judicial need and they don't have any space. And so it really helps the argument to get additional judicial resource, because additional judicial resource is not real expensive when you look at you know, state budgets and those numbers. Having the space for those judges is a huge issue. So that's, you know, one consideration, and I think it was really, it had never happened before that I'm aware of, getting the 2 judges, but it was really the population argument, right? We had the political will of the commission, the support of the community to say, you know, we will expand, and we have a need. We've had a need, and so we got those 2. But you're right, there's no precision there.
I know, undoubtedly. It took a lot of postcards. Thank you to the 1,000 people that helped, and the 14 legislators that had to hear from him in the governor's office. You know, but it took a lot. And according to Dave Doyle, no, it's never happened in the history of Oregon where a county actually got 2 judges. But when we needed 3, why would we ask for just 1? So, I don't know. Commissioner DeBonne, did you want to add anything at this moment?
No, you know, no, not at this time.
Okay, thank you. I just didn't want to not acknowledge that you're part of our discussion this morning.
One question I wanted to ask was about other entities using the shelled out space. You know, we've had Saving Grace that has operations over in our Mike Meyer building right now. You know, it's mentioned to me that they are desperately in need of more space in the vicinity of the courthouse, you know, because many of their activities are coordinated with and synced up with operations in the courthouse or, in the court system. And I know that they currently have some space in the courthouse that they use. And is there, if we proceeded with shelling out a fourth floor, are there opportunities to use that space in like cubicle format or some kind of real simple format for activities, organizations that are court related, or have synergies with the court system, because while it's really hard to picture a shelling out a fourth floor and just picturing that just sitting empty for 10 years, 15 years, whatever. The idea that the space could be used by community partners that are performing critical services for our community. That's, it makes it a much more attractive proposition.
Yeah, I have a couple thoughts, and then I'll pass it to Judge Ashby. One way that I think about space is as a percentage of our overall county space. So we have about 500,000 square feet countywide of finished office space. A shelled out floor would represent about, not including the lobby in terms of usable space, around 10,000 square feet. So in terms of our overall management of square feet, it's the opportunity to gain some efficiency in terms of cost in creating it. But when we think about the amount of square footage that may be underutilized, typically an organization, we'd want about 6% of flex space at any given time for remodels, for flex growth, for temporary programs. So that space would represent some flex space for us. We currently are operating at a space deficit. We have folks that are working remotely with growth during the pandemic that we don't have a desk for. And so it would help, it would go somewhat toward addressing that space deficit. And then in terms of community partners, if we were to move forward with the shell space, I think through the next 6 months through schematic design and design development gives us the opportunity to reach out and see what kind of either community partners or county offices that may be able to support in the short term. And we certainly could, at a lesser cost than building courtrooms, build open office space with a few private offices on either the third or the fourth floor that would still allow us in the future to convert those to courtrooms when needed. And then I'll let Judge Ashby address potential partners as well.
Lee, if you could just answer, how many square feet will be added with the two buildings in Redmond when they're done?
It's plus or minus 20,000 square feet.
Okay, all right.
Commissioner Chang, I believe that you really identified it. The partners need to be they need to be secure partners just because of the type of information, the physical security concerns. Sergeant Gibson could certainly speak to that. And I think it would be important to provide an opportunity for if the commission went this direction to say, okay, we may have an opportunity for some space here. Here's some identifying those constituencies and those user groups, and saying what's that interest, because it's a county building, and it's really puts the court in a sometimes a challenging position to say you're in, you're not in. And we always have to be sensitive to appearances of how closely we're aligned with certain groups. So I definitely think there's an opportunity there, but that might be something that you would want to push out to, a group of nonprofits, public defense providers, just as a suggestion.
Thank you. But that said, if they were secure entities, then the court is open to it.
Yes.
And that kind of takes us to, some specific options that we provided to the court, as well as to a budget summary. And I will pass it back to Wayne.
Okay. So over the last several months, and with Pence Construction, John's help, we've gone through several different budget exercises. At one point, I think we had 7 different options, including the projection out for future, if we had to come back and build it at a later time. But we've whittled those down to these 2 basic options. Option 1 being the baseline, which includes the basement build-out, the first floor administration build-out, the second floor courtroom sets, which gives those 2 extra courtrooms, and then with a 3rd floor shell for future expansion. On the next page, we'll go through.
What's option 1? What's the square footage of option 1?
Option 1 is 53 and change, I think.
Option 1 is 43,000 square feet on floors and 14,000 square foot basement.
The basement, okay.
Including the basement, about 54, yeah. And that would give you the extra 2 courtrooms for the 2 extras. Currently, you've got 9 judges with 7 courtrooms. These 2 new courtrooms would be 9 and 9. Then option 2 is the same as baseline option 1, except for the addition of the 4th floor shell, which again, for future expansion, and as you guys just discussed, it could be, flex space, administration space, office space, or also for that future extra 2 courtrooms.
And how many square feet is the option, that floor, the 4th floor?
The 4th floor?
That's another, basically we'd go up to 56,000 square feet in 4 floors and a 14,000 square foot basement.
So it's 13,000 then?
You're basically correct.
Yeah. And then that total, in the future, when you build out the 4th floor for the 2 courtroom sets, that would give you a total of 13 courtrooms for 13 possible judges. And then getting into the numbers, so for these 2 options, for the baseline with the 3rd floor shell, we're projecting at about 40 million. And that, we do have a built-in inflation in that for the escalation of about 5%, which, just that cushion, holding that cushion till we can bid this out next summer. Once we have the final design set, we're gonna bid this out next summer, and then we'll be able to really hone in on the hard cost. Option 2 with the 4th floor shell, that bumps it up, and that's building it now with the efficiencies that John talked about. That bumps it up another 4.5 million to 44.5. Again, economy of scale and the efficiencies making that, only 4.5 million to do that extra 14,000 square feet. Any questions on that? Okay. And then finally on the next steps, so with your decision today, we will be able to transition, we're kind of at a crossroads right now. We'll be able to transition, we're finished with the programming phase, and now we want to get into the schematic so we can proceed with, with the final design and then start getting into DDs and the final permit set. And then once we're done with schematic design, probably February, March, we'll be able to do another round of cost estimating and budget update, and then we'll return to you guys for your approval on next steps. Cool. And that's it for the slide deck. Any more questions?
So that's approximately $700 a square foot then, at the 57. I mean, as someone who just came back from Las Vegas last night, and you see what they do, and you see their skyline, and something is like whatever, and then you go back a couple of years later, I hadn't been there and you just go, okay, what have they done? They've gone up even higher. So, that town knows how to build up, I guess you could say. It's like, and it just gets more and more people there, so it's pretty, it's confusing. But that, to me, okay, so 701, okay. Because at first I was, we were talking about 40,000 square feet at like $1,000 a square foot, but we're no longer talking about that, right?
Correct. And to that end, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Lee, but originally on that 40,000 square feet, we were projecting that 40 million. Now we're looking at a much bigger square footage, but we're still able to, hold within that 40 million.
Well, that's what you had told me when we had that meeting, because I was going like, how did this go from like up to 1,000 a square foot, Yeah. That was really bothering me, seriously.
And I'd like to give credit to John's team and the design project team. As we worked into the programming, looking at modern courtrooms, we really were able to see that there are efficiencies to be gained, which help on the cost side. And so, to your point, Commissioner Adair, we are looking at still that $40 million for the base model, 44.5 for the fourth shell that we had talked about in terms of numbers going back 6 to 9 months. But we're looking at a larger footprint that accommodates a courtroom set with a secure transport in the middle, and the opportunity for the shell space for the future. So the good news is we're looking at a more robust project plan for very similar costs.
And it's a little bit like shopping at Costco. I mean, we are, we go for the fourth floor. Our cost per square foot goes down, but you gotta have 5 jars of spaghetti sauce in your cabinet, and enough time to make that worth buying.
Adding the fourth floor, if you look at square foot cost, you're basically down to about $635.
That's exactly what I got, and you're saving $66 a square foot.
So obviously looking at the Madras or the Jefferson one, which was at $495, and you look at the inflation that we've had since that time that was finished, it seems to be in, kind of in line with each other and stuff. So, we are and Wayne kind of brought, we are carrying a pretty good inflation number, bigger than what you normally would, but obviously we're trying to protect, the project. We don't know what's going on. I mean, if everyone's following suit, we're kind of going into recession. Hopefully some products come down in cost, labor comes down in cost, and hopefully we get some benefit of that as well in this.
Yeah. And I mean, I track the construction of the building in Madras, and I mean, it seems like that is a simpler situation to build in than building a 4 stories on the corner of Greenwood and Bond.
As well as it's not attaching to an existing building, and,
Yeah.
Those things, yes.
An occupied operational
Yeah,
building.
occupied
Yeah.
site, which makes it.
We all know remodeling is much worse than building new, so that's a given.
And you're building something so unique as well. I mean, just the 3 kinds of circulation that have to be accounted for and not crossing paths, the security concerns. I mean, this is not. It's a very complicated kind of buildings.
No, and also, you're in the downtown Bend, and it's going to stand out, and how to make that all blend in with, and fit the community well is going to be one of those other challenges we've got coming.
Commissioner DeBonne, do you have a raised?
Yeah, so I do support going for that 4th floor at this time. Having another 10 or 13,000 flex space for future public safety court, proceeding needs is going to be very valuable. The escalation of the numbers, really just take it to another level. As I say, this was going to be a $20-something million project. We're talking to the 40s. A legislative ask for capital during this long session is going to be a priority. So hopefully we can, as the fiscal responsible party at Deschutes County to build this, hopefully we can get partnership by the state of Oregon for this capital. We all know that we're in that either sweet spot or bad spot of being able to have resources, and so the state doesn't worry about us as much as some other counties that don't have the resources that we have. But as I say, I want to show support for that 4th floor, the elbow room to do good work for the people during the, any court proceeding that comes now and into the future.
Commissioner Chang, did you have something?
Yeah, if we're moving on to a decision point here, I'll just say this project should have been started years ago. I think it's actually very unfortunate that it wasn't. If it had been started before we reduced the assessed property tax rate in 2017, 2018, we could be arriving at this moment having to borrow $10 million or more less than we will have to borrow to proceed with this project. that's very hard. It's a very big price tag. That said, I definitely think that the option number 2, shelling out the 4th floor, is a much more cost-effective option, and it future-proofs us and creates these opportunities for partner organizations or other county departments conceivably to use some of this space until the court needs it for additional court rooms. So I would support proceeding with option number 4, or option number 2 with the 4th floor.
Wasn't part of the reason why we did get the 2 judges because we really weren't asking for money? Wasn't that part of the story? I know we're asking for money now, or there was a letter put that we were supposed to send in to the legislature, but wasn't that part of the story that we were Deschutes County and we were okay?
Yes.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, Commissioner Dare, so remember, Association of Oregon Counties has convened a group that does review court facility needs around the state at the county level. So where we can be at that table and respect everybody else's needs, but also advocate for our own. And that's traditionally has been done with a court facility needs assessment. So there's some history of that.
Yeah, and I would concur with Judge Ashby's explanation earlier that the population was really the big argument, plus a lot of advocacy from the county, plus legislators, our legislative delegation from Central Oregon and Deschutes County working really hard for us. There was many things that went into the success of that ask for the 2 judges, and I with the dramatic escalation in capital costs in the last couple of years, I don't think anyone at Oregon Justice Department or the legislature is going to call us out or chastise us for asking for capital dollars at this point for this project.
Well, the fact that it's only $140 over the square footage of the Jefferson, and when I was at the Jefferson Courthouse, I was very impressed with how nice that building was. It seems like it is, but then again, building all that extra space and not really utilizing it, and if we don't get more judges for another 15, 20 years, just having that sit there, I would think we would want to really look forward and think what really does fit, so that we just don't just spend $5 more million and have something that's sitting there collecting dust.
And our experience has been that when we have available space, we typically find suitable partners for that space. And so I would expect that's something we'll be working on over the next 6 months, depending on the amount of shell space that the board directs us to create. But I think there's a good opportunity to find suitable partners.
Specific question about that. We know that we have severe space constraints at the DEA's office. That's starting to flow north into Mike Meyer and other places. How does this project generally alleviate some of that space pressure at the DEA's office? And then specifically, how could a 4th shelled out floor put a dent in that need as well?
So currently the plan is that we would move state court administration from the 2nd floor of the Great Courthouse to the new addition. That space would then function as a kind of relief valve for the DA's office and help bring them to potentially what their current needs are. In all reality, my best assessment from kind of being the boots on the ground and space needs around the county is that as soon as we provide that extra space that state courts are currently in, the district attorney's office will need more space. I don't know that that space alone, given the growth over the last 3 to 5 years, will meet their needs. It'll certainly be a great relief valve in the short term, but that's a group we would look at closely for additional shelf space, and I believe they would be a suitable partner and appropriate partner, being separated by floors in the same building. That's just one option, and there is a lot of things to explore, but certainly this project will function in the short term as a relief valve for the space needs that the DA's office has.
Judge Ashby, can you just concur with that verbally for the record?
Yes, that is true. This really addresses, it's more of a campus look. It's not just a court. It certainly addresses the court's needs, but there are acute needs at the district attorney's office. We knew that we were going to essentially migrate south, and that will provide great assistance to the district attorney's office. And of course, that space already exists. We could certainly partner with Lee and the county. Multnomah County went through a huge construction project building their courthouse. I know Boise did several years ago, and really look at that process. How did they vet partners? How did that community discussion go? So we can really look at that fourth floor utilization, make sure that it's filled and filled appropriately.
Judge Ashby, you and I were talking a little bit about kind of the strain at the state level on the public defender system the other day. I mean, would those qualify as secure entities that conceivably could use some of this space as well?
I think they can. I mean, you might just look at different things like key carding differently, and what are the flows into and out of the building going to be? Would you now have everyone go through, security? So would that increase, create some staffing changes for the sheriff? But we have confidence in the people who come into our courthouse, and so I definitely think that they would be appropriate partners to look at.
Yeah, I don't. We need to continue that discussion to really understand, what would help with the public defense system locally. But I mean, if it's not just not having enough people and not having enough money to pay them, but like space could be a useful component of that, then I think that would be a really interesting thing to explore.
I'd be happy to follow up on that. We had that brief exchange, but would be happy to talk at another point. Anytime you'd like to actually share what we've been doing in Deschutes County to avoid being in a crisis situation.
Thank you.
Yes, we do. Are we up to 8 murders this year?
I have stopped counting. There are many. I know Sergeant Gibson would say that we have more people accused of homicide in the jail than at any other time in the past.
That's what I thought. It's, when you hear what happened in Moscow at the University of Idaho, and they had, I think the town's population is like 25,000, and they had not had a murder since, I believe, 2000, maybe 15. And then they have that horrific crime. But, we're dealing with a lot. Sergeant Gibson, is there anything you wanted to add from your point of view?
Thank you, Commissioners, for allowing me to address you. Sergeant Gibson, I'm Court Security and Transport Sergeant for the Sheriff's Office. I'm just thankful for this opportunity to be part of this group and listen to, have our concerns addressed and listened to. I think in the last expansion, some of that stuff kind of got overlooked for us. That makes what we do on a day-to-day operation of moving people throughout the courthouse more difficult. And I think what we have set through and gone through during this process really kind of addresses some of those problems and brings us up to where we are in this day and age in courthouse security and the movement of people around that courthouse.
So you feel very well, your issues are very well addressed then with this plan, is what you're saying?
Yes, Commissioner. That's what we feel like at the sheriff's office.
Because it seems like it, you know, as you said, in this case, we really do want 3 silos. You know, your operation, the judges, and then the public, so.
Correct.
I mean, we're always trying to get rid of silos, but not in the courthouse.
Correct. It's kind of a unique place.
Exactly. Thank you.
If there's no further discussion, I would move, sorry, I need to pull this back up to get the motion language. I would move approval of programming option 2.
I'll second it.
Any further discussion? I really didn't want to spend this much money, but I'm really relieved that we're down to, even with option 1 at $701 versus $1,000. That was causing me not to sleep for the last couple of months because it just seemed totally way out of line when you see. It's a big project, and I know there are certain things that are going to cost a certain amount, but still, it was out of line. But and then if we can actually utilize we will have the 4th floor shell. The 3rd floor will be utilized immediately or not? Because it's considered a shell. We'll have 2 shells then, won't we? We'll have the 3rd and 4th floor as a shell?
Correct. Currently, under this proposal, 3rd floor would be shell, 4th floor would be shell. And then over the next few months, we can look at options to utilize that space.
So that's 26,000 square feet. So that's a huge amount that if we can actually find a way to utilize for our campus, that would be really excellent. Okay. All right. So Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair votes yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, everybody.
Really exciting to see this moving forward.
Yes.
I know. I worry about some of the things just drop, get their focus on.
Okay, do we have Mr. Hines on the phone, or on, oh, we have him in the room? Oh, gosh, okay. Thank you for joining us.
Get the mic.
All right, good morning, Commissioners.
Good morning.
For the record, Jeff Hines, Director of Deschutes County Fair and Expo. And here before you this morning for consideration for the approval of contract number 2022-960, which would be a notice of intent to award contract to Oregon Beverage Services for beverage management, beverage sales management at Deschutes County Fair and Expo. As you may recall, in June of last year, one of our long-term employees, Howard Butch Graham, retired, and we've reimagined the way that we provide some of our services, specifically in the food and beverage department on Fair and Expo campus. One of those was separating the food and beverage programs and providing specific duties for that. And part of that was to go out and find a provider who could focus specifically on the beverage sales management portion. We tried a sort of a test case for several months to see what that would look like and would that be an efficient operation for us, and have come back with satisfactory results. And this would be the continuation of that program by going out to RFP for a agreement for multiple years for the beverage sales management portion of that component of the Fair and Expo operations. The RFP was released, and we have a sole bidder on that program, and we are bringing that forward to you today for consideration of notice of intent to award that contract to Oregon Beverage Services, who is the incumbent who is providing it on a test case as well. With that, I will turn it over to you for questions or consideration.
They were the sole bidder. What was their bid?
So the bid is a percentage of sales revenue. So it is an agreement that has fiscal impact to the county only when funds are generated. So it will allow allow Fair and Expo to receive a minimum of 38% of every dollar of beverage sales sold on campus at any time during any event. And requires us to have minimal to no expense in order to generate those funds. The additional expenses would be used to cover cost of goods and services, which would include labor and product. And that would make up an amount not to exceed 62%. And that would include their management fees as well. So it provides a guarantee of revenue with no expense should we have a situation like we ran into with the pandemic when we had to shutter operations where we had permanent staff or expenses out there that we were required to pay. This would be a different situation where we wouldn't have those continued expenses. We would have no expense if we have no opportunity to generate sales. So a little bit less of a liability there. As well as provides an opportunity that a secondary company provides liability insurance for that beverage sales management portion as well, providing a second layer of protection for the county. So I think it provides several benefits above the way we were prior operating.
Hopefully we'll never have to experience that kind of a business situation again. But
yes, we certainly hope not. Although, as we mentioned, it allowed us to diversify what we do at Fair and Expo, as was certainly discussed in the prior conversation. Probably one of the few fairgrounds in the country that operates a courthouse on its campus at the present time as well.
And it did make a huge difference in things backing up with our judicial system. So thank you, Jeff, for, doing that and working it around what everything else that you do at our expo center.
yeah, and the mass vaccination clinic and all sorts of other things that helps improve the resiliency of our community.
So,
I've got a
Commissioner,
question.
you have a question?
Yes, Commissioner DeBonne here. So, Jeff, is there flexibility in brands or kind of promotion? So I saw, kind of the canned beverages by, big brands. But are going to be able to move around? Like if somebody wants to help promote or be part of Deschutes County's vibrance and success, or is Oregon Beverage Service going to be kind of making those deals?
So it would have no impact on the ability for either Fair and Expo or outside parties to work with providers, producers to market their products, and that has no impact on the products that are served on site. Certainly, Oregon Beverage Service would be our conduit to have discussions with our partners, our renters who utilize the property. But Fair and Expo staff would be a party to those conversations as well to make sure that the needs of our renter, of our user, as well as our guest and community is respected, and that the products served are the appropriate and correct, I guess not correct, the choices that make the most sense for either the event or the attendee. And it has no bearing on specific choices, and we have no limitations on what products can or cannot be served on property.
So, and that's what I'm thinking of the, beverage industry itself here in Central Oregon, because I've heard some of the small folks say that there's this big step between, we're doing our thing locally, we're able to put beer in kegs, but if they sign up with the distributor, then they're kind of told what to do instead of being a little bit more flexible. So I just want to make sure that there's some discussions that we can have about, the next big, push or advertising opportunity or growth spurt or whatever might be out there, that we have flexibility.
Yeah, absolutely. So this does provide that flexibility. It doesn't lock us into any particular agreement with any specific beverage producer. It allows Oregon Beverage to go out and work with each of those producers or distributors individually to come up with the product line that makes the most sense for the event and the consumer on site, and gives us that flexibility to utilize local products as well as the national brands at the same time. And thus far, Oregon Beverage has proven to be a good partner in doing that, and working not only with those large-scale national brands, but also having great conversations with our local providers and producers as well, which certainly Deschutes County and Central Oregon is known for, with the number of microbrews, breweries here in our market.
Yeah, as I say, it could be interesting times. So then staffing also, is there like a core set of staff and then it's flexible staffing? Because I know that's like during the fair or during the big events, everybody's looking for that next flex staff or variable staff. What does that look like out there?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Oregon Beverage would provide a key contact or contacts for the events here on the Fair and Expo site, which would be our primary contact, although that would be managed, as I understand it, currently out of their office in Salem, but they do have local staff here as well. They do have the ability to swell, much more so than we've seen when we were managing operations because of their size and their service to many large events across the state. So they're the provider at Pendleton Whiskey Music Festival. They provided the Oregon State Fair, a number of the larger county fairs, although we are the largest, but most of the other large county fairs throughout the state, and many other large events. They have the proven ability to be able to provide staffing as well as generate revenue at those events, and they have that statewide ability to recruit and retain staff, as well as utilize local staffing as well. They've been great partners with us to assure that those team members that we have utilized for many years are continued to be utilized here locally as well.
Great, thank you.
So I have a question. Jeff, whose decision is it when you have like a vendor at the indoor building, like at the rodeo, and they only sell alcoholic products? Is that their decision, or is that our decision? Because I was trying to buy water, and nobody was selling anything that wasn't alcohol. And it was really difficult.
Yeah,
Just wondering, it just seems like we should offer non-alcoholic too.
Absolutely, 100%, and something that we can make sure that we work on, that each of our bar locations should also provide at minimum a non-alcoholic option, including water, but potentially others. And to my knowledge, that has traditionally been the case. So I'll go back and find out why that may not have ever been done, or maybe we can talk offline about individual events, and we can look and see when that occurred. But moving forward, certainly that is the intent, is to make sure that we have both alcoholic or non-alcoholic products alongside any alcoholic beverage provided at that point of sale, not only at all of the other points of sale on site. Certainly, we do have many different options throughout the events, whether it's in the event center, in First Interstate Bank Arena, or throughout the grounds. We provide multiple opportunities, but we want to make sure that we're providing that non-alcoholic option at that alcoholic point of sale every time.
Okay, thank you. I mean, I would have thought you could get both.
Yeah, I agree with you 100% on that. That should be the standard practice.
Thank you. Do we have a motion?
I move approval of chair signature of document number 2022-960, a notice of intent to award a contract to Oregon Beverage Service for alcohol beverage sales management at the Deschutes County Fair and Expo.
And I'll second it.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Nope.
Mr. Chang?
Yes.
Mr. DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thanks, Jeff, for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
Item number 10. You can see we're right on schedule. We're an hour behind. I knew the schedule was really optimistic. Okay. Lottery funds.
Right. Good morning, Commissioners. For the record, Stephanie Robinson, Grants and Operations Specialist. Earlier this year, Commissioners reviewed the anticipated revenue from the county's portion of video lottery proceeds and developed an expenditure plan. The board requested additional information on the United Way emergency food, clothing, and shelter allocation and paused on a funding allocation for this program. So as some background, prior to 2013, the county administered a community grant program that included grants for emergency food, clothing, and shelter. In May 2013, the Board of Commissioners decided to transfer the administration of those grants to the United Way, which already had an established grant advisory committee for distributing the federal emergency funds they receive. Since 2018, Deschutes County has funded this program at $80,000 annually. I'm here today seeking board direction on the United Way emergency food, clothing, and shelter funding allocation for this fiscal year. And we also have Whitney Swander, Interim Executive Director for United Way Central Oregon, with us today in the audience.
Yes, Whitney, would you like to join? And please let us know what you're doing.
Good morning, Commissioners. It's great to be here. So the United Way of Central Oregon has had a presence here in Central Oregon for nearly 70 years. Next year is our 70th anniversary. As the great summary that was provided, we've been partnering with Deschutes County in a handful of recent years to support the distribution of these funds, the video lottery funds. For more than a decade, we have been a recipient of the Federal Emergency Services Program grant. And really the message I want to share with you is the incredible value that the board's contribution to that body's work is it really expands the opportunity in our region. That the emergency grant is a federal program, and as many people know, the requirements and the capacity required for organizations to receive those federal grants really limits the number of nonprofits that can receive and administer them. And so this provides an opportunity for the United Way to steward these resources and expand the number of nonprofits that are able to provide these life-saving and life-sustaining resources in our region. And expand the number of trusted partners that people in our community who are experiencing crisis can go to and access. So, the types of programs that or organizations that we have funded last year include the Assistance League of Bend to support their clothing and essential items that they provide to children, the Bethlehem Inn for their emergency services work. The Council on Aging supports their Meals on Wheels work, the Family Kitchen and the hot meals that they provide to families, J and the work that they do for homeless and at-risk young people, Jericho Road of Redmond for their food, shelter, and emergency assistance work, the Lapine Community Kitchen for food and clothing, the Nativity Lutheran Church for firewood and food assistance, Saving Grace to support survivors of intimate partner violence, Shepherd's House Ministries in Bend and Redmond for shelter and outreach, St. Vincent de Paul in Bend and Redmond, the Giving Plate, and the Salvation Army of Central Oregon. As was mentioned, there is a standing board for those federal dollars that oversees the collection of applications and then the allocation of resources. So this is, really a seamless way that we can get funds into the community because we're just kind of adding into the capacity that exists within the United Way.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you for that breakdown, Whitney. Any questions? Any comments?
Thank you very much. So I'll just acknowledge that it's been great to be a partner and get to get resources out to people in need. I mean, that's the number one thing we'd like to be doing here for sure. Question for Stephanie, if she can help me, is this allocation part of our spreadsheet and we just didn't kind of make the expenditure, or did we not have it on the spreadsheet at all? I'm referring to the video lottery allocation workshop.
Yeah, there's an $80,000 placeholder in the spreadsheet.
Yep, okay. And so we just stood by when we were doing our allocations at the time, but it is in the big picture, it was kind of scheduled in.
Correct.
Thank you.
Well, I appreciate the fact that you only take 2% for your administration.
Mm-hmm.
Could you explain a little bit more about how that Federal Emergency Services grant works? And so these funds are not matching to that, but somehow there's synergy between these funds and that program.
Yeah, and I will, if I fumble over details, I am the interim executive director and I'm new. What I understand is in the mid-'80s, there was the Federal Emergency Food and Shelter Program that was set up. There's an appropriation from Congress, and there is a formula that determines what eligible jurisdictions get a certain amount of money. There is a partnership between the administering agency is FEMA, and there are requirements around who makes up the governing body for these grants. So there are requirements that there are certain, that United Way has been named as sort of the convening and administering group for this. There are, in cities where there's Catholic Charities, they're at the table, Jewish Federation is at the table, the American Red Cross is at the table, and then other relevant sort of community partners. So we have a standing committee that includes all of those folks that are here in Deschutes County. They meet kind of I would say they meet as necessary in recent years because some ARPA dollars were moved to these committees nationally to administer. So this committee has been a little more active in the last few years. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Chang?
Yeah, and then most of it. And then so the video lottery dollars that we're contributing just kind of supplements. It's in addition to the federal funds that United Way is the designated recipient of that you're deploying.
Yeah, and I would say it expands as opposed to supplements because really, truly, because of the requirements for a federal grant like the FEMA grant, really only the sort of big players in Deschutes County would really be eligible for these, would have the capacity to be able to receive, administer, and report on those federal dollars. So for example, these video lottery dollars allow the United Way to support programs like the Assistance League of Bend, for example, smaller, more volunteer-driven organizations that do really good work in the community. So it's not necessarily a supplement. I would think of it more as expanding how we're able to get those emergency type dollars out.
And since you have a program and you have relationships with all of these organizations already, there's great efficiency with adding money into that system. And
yeah, I would say it's definitely an economies of scale sort of thing. Like rather than running two separate RFP processes or proposal processes, we're able to do one. And for organizations that have the back office support to administer a federal grant, we allocate federal dollars to those. For smaller organizations that don't, these video lottery dollars allow us to really expand, again, those life-saving and sustaining services through more partners.
And the lists, the list of organizations that you shared with us, does that change a lot over time, or is it pretty consistent? Or
this is where my historical knowledge is probably not an asset here, and I could pull and bring them. My sense is this list, there are some core partners that receive funds year to year or over the last 3 to 5 years that we've been partnering.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah, I'll just say that I'm supportive of continuing this relationship, and it seems like this is a great pathway to channel these funds out into the community to have the kinds of impacts that we're interested in having. One question, like for longer term, that I'd love for us to take a look at is there are, I believe there are some of these organizations that are that Whitney mentioned that are service partners already. So I think it'd be helpful to kind of look at the overlap and think about whether it might make more sense either to to consolidate. So there's like one channel or the other that we're sending funds to these organizations to. But
One thing I might add to that, we do have a representative from Deschutes County that is on our board, and I think there's been some changes, so maybe is it Whitney? Oh, Stephanie, great. So there's definitely an opportunity to operationalize exactly what you're saying, or at least be in closer
right.
communication around that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you are, United Way offers a very efficient mechanism to move those funds. And, our regular service partners, there's no, maybe do they actually have to submit a proposal on an annual basis, or are they just roll over?
Our service partners are reporting, and for the record, Whitney Hale, Deputy County Administrator, sorry for popping up to join you, Stephanie. They're reporting quarterly and then annually at the end of their year with a proposal for the coming year of what they're proposing to fund and how that's changed, as accompanied by outcomes from the prior year.
Right.
And just to hop back to the discussion and what Whitney just highlighted, the county's staff's purpose, or one of our goals in staffing that committee, is giving the full committee visibility on the board's awards that you've made both through the Service Partner Program and other grant programs. And so staff comes prepared to those meetings to share of the applicants that are applying through the United Way process, which of those have already received funding and how much. So they provide kind of a link between the two processes for the county. But certainly we're happy to revisit, based on board direction, sort of your preferences for when there is a partner who is applying through United Way who is also receiving funds, if the board has direction specific to that.
Yeah, I don't have a good sense of how much overlap, but if there's a lot of overlap, then, saving people from having to submit 2 reports a year, I think there's some value in that. It's just something to explore moving forward.
Great. Commissioner DeBonne, did you want to add anything else? No?
No. It's good to just, with the leadership of United Way, so thank you for joining us, changing and just taking a big picture look at this, making sure we're getting resources out to people that need them in an efficient fashion, just like Commissioner Chang was talking about. So I'm supportive of this allocation.
Okay, so does someone want to make a motion then?
This doesn't say we need a motion, but
I know, but we held it on we weren't funding it until we actually had this discussion. So we don't really.
I would suggest that you make a motion if you do want to proceed with the allocation.
dollar amount, fund source, recipient?
Correct.
Okay. I move allocation of $80,000 of video lottery funds to the United Way to support the emergency food, clothing, and shelter allocation. Is that all right?
I'll second it.
Okay, is there any further discussion? Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. And thank you for bringing it in. I believe it was like at least 10 organizations. Some of them had 2 locations, and yeah, they're really great 501c3s in our community. So thank you for supporting them.
Thank you.
Okay, item number 11. Looks like we should have Christine and maybe Ann Kelty. No? Janice.
Me and Janice.
You get me again, sorry. For the record, Janice Garceau, Director of Health Services, and I am here with, it's on.
Oh, Ann Kilty, Manager of Clinical Services for Public Health.
And we're here this morning, Commissioners. We're actually returning to request approval to accept the Central Oregon Health Council grant in the amount of $80,000 and move approval on board signature of order number 2022-069 designating signing authority to Ann Kilty. This particular grant was specifically for the purchase of a mobile van to support outreach services for 3 key healthcare teams that provide services in the community to vulnerable populations. I'm going to pause here and really let our expert talk about why this is important and what services this provides, and then we can answer any questions that you might have.
Thanks, Janice. As we discussed a couple weeks ago, the services we would like to provide will be reproductive health services, some basic health screenings that could be useful out in the community, blood pressure checks, diabetes screenings. Our WIC team will be providing nutritional support, breastfeeding support, some dental, early dental intervention for pregnant and postpartum women and children up to the age of 5. And then our perinatal care team will be doing maternity case management services out in the outlying regions also. We feel like it's really important that we reach out to people and communities that are not able to access the Bend and Redmond locations very easily. We know people have problems getting into the clinic. Some people don't have good transportation, don't have resources to pay for gas, have childcare and work issues. So we think that going out into the communities will allow people to have better health outcomes than they've been able to get because they haven't been able to have access to these programs.
Couple questions. I'm supportive. It's good that we got this grant approved. Where's the van going to be parked at night?
Oh, that's such a good question. Most likely either over at the Courtney building or down here at the Wall Street building. We're, as you know, we have a lot of moving parts for space right now. So the final decision hasn't been made on that, but I think more likely at Courtney than downtown, but I'm not going to rule out downtown.
And then would this van show up as somebody's private residence, or would it always just be a common place that you would provide service?
Yeah, it's not going to be like home health that we would be going to a specific person at a private residence. I think more about central locations, like we've partnered well with the libraries in the past. Perhaps we could, be in certain parking lots on certain days, or other such locations where people could count on us being there and could come to us, but not have to drive all the way to Bend or Redmond.
So you're talking about being in what, Sisters, Lapine?
So I mean, I think that those locations are underserved right now. Sisters, Lapine, some of the communities that are even smaller. Maybe we could work out something to be there on maybe a quarterly basis, depending on what the needs are in those places. Sisters and Lapine probably more frequently than that. Maybe, 2 days a month or something to make sure that we're getting the services to the people who need us. It's just hard to get here, especially in winter, if you have unreliable transportation or you don't drive or.
Mosaic provides mobile health services to underserved populations. What's the overlap and what's the distinction, or if there's a lot of overlap, then what's the case that additional mobile support in specific locations at specific times is needed?
Yeah, that's a great question. I am not well versed in where the Mosaic Mobile Clinic is and when. Some of the services that we're offering may be available through Mosaic, but we have programs that make them free or very low cost, low barrier. We have staff who are bilingual who are going out, and we uniquely offer the WIC program and the perinatal care teams. We have other programs available that are not available outside of public health.
So perinatal care coordination and WIC services in particular are not services that are offered by Mosaic Medical as a primary care provider. And then some of the folks that access our reproductive health services are folks that may not decide for whatever reason to access those services at a larger entity such as Mosaic Medical. And then the last component is that there are pieces of the services that can be offered by reproductive health that can be offered at a very low cost or no cost that otherwise, because of how they're funded and the ways that funds come to public health, that otherwise individuals might encounter a much higher cost for and might create a barrier to good healthcare services. So those are a handful of things that this would bring into the community that are not going to be accessed through the Mosaic medical van.
Great, thank you.
Do we have a motion then?
I'll make a motion. Move approval to accept the Central Oregon Health Council grant in the amount of $80,000.
Second?
All right, further discussion? Okay, Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes.
And
The second
And to
motion?
follow up, I'll do, move approval of the board signature of order number 2022-069, designating signing authority to Ann Kilty.
Second?
Further discussion? So, Anne, you're actually going to buy the vehicle that we're talking about?
Yes.
Okay, all right, do you have?
Who's in charge of tricking it out?
You are.
It will be a trick to get it done, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Commissioner DeBonne,
Yes.
Commissioner Chang,
Yes.
and the chair votes yes. How
Thank you
soon
so
will it be in operation, if you are able to purchase it in a timely basis?
So we would like to start no later than July 1st. So we want to be up and going for sure by the start of the next fiscal year. Some of it's going to depend on how long it takes us to find a van and if it needs any retrofitting. But we would like to get it up and running as soon as we can.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for bringing access to health services to the people where they need it.
Thank you, Ann.
Okay, item number 12. Janice.
Hi. I'm going to invite my colleague Emily Freeland, or Emily Horton now, to the table as well, if I may. Thank you, Emily. And Cheryl is in the room in case there are questions about any of the fiscal impacts. So, Commissioners, this is a request for approval to extend 7 limited duration COVID-19 positions and add 1 new position to continue our COVID-19 recovery step-down process. We're moving approval of acceptance of $574,696 from ARPA reserves for the purpose of COVID-19 recovery within the Health Services Department, and also requesting approval of resolution number 2022-076 to extend the 7 limited duration positions and create 1 new limited duration public health educator position within the Health Services Fund. This package of positions is really the process by which we are reducing the team that was tasked with responding to the COVID-19 emergency. It's one step in a series of steps we've undertaken over the last months. We first reduced some costs in terms of the use of temporary help, and this then significantly reduces the footprint of that team to scale. And I'll be asking Emily to talk a little bit about that scale over the next 6 months to a year to 2 years as we step down. In your materials, we talk about the variability of the work associated with responding to the COVID-19 pandemic at this point. We are definitely in better shape than we were in, obviously, 2 years ago. But there is still some work that we're required to be responsive to, and it tends to ebb and flow with a great deal of variability depending on the emergence of new variants, the emergence of new vaccine, increased flow to call centers, increased requests to do outreach to vulnerable populations, et cetera. That graph is represented on page 1 of the materials in your agenda packet. And then the second page really goes into the details of what services are provided, what these staff will do, and how we envision stepping down that team over time as we're responding to things related to COVID. In the end, we will land with one emergency response manager that will help position us to pivot towards doing a better job and a more robust job within health services responding to emergencies in the community beyond things like pandemics, which hopefully we don't have to deal with routinely. So we think about things like smoke, fire, heat, and other emerging infections or outbreaks that can put a great deal of pressure on the public health system. I'm going to pause there because that's a lot of information, and give some space for questions and also room for Emily to add any information that she would like to add.
So first I'll pause and see if you guys have any questions based on all of that. Janice did a great job of explaining kind of our thought process in moving this forward. Clearly, we don't know what comes next, but we're much more prepared and have systems in place to kind of handle those ebbs and flows. This plan was built on a whole combination of factors. We really want to make sure that our clinical services teams who provide support and vaccination and support for outbreaks in long-term care facilities and places where there are continuing outbreaks and these effects are bigger of COVID-19 and also other communicable diseases. We work closely with our communicable disease team to make sure that we have redundancy and we can support each other in moving forward kind of out of this pandemic kind of response and into something more endemic, but also handling those other diseases and making sure we're prepared for that. As well as all of those social services, wraparound services, and supporting those most vulnerable. So we have a pretty robust section of this that is community outreach. Janice talked about how that kind of links into the emergency preparedness and response piece. So creating those connections and that kind of infrastructure and system within public health where we can have rapid response and outreach to all of our community when we have these kind of emergency type situations or rapid kind of moving situations, whatever those might be.
So my question is, are all these, well, I see one of them is a new one, but are the other positions all currently filled with someone in them?
Yes.
Okay, so how many other empty positions do you have, FTEs, with public health?
Actually, wait, sorry. One of those positions is not filled currently right now. We haven't filled it because it's a short-term duration position, and I didn't want to try to fill it and then have someone in it for only 3 months. So that's the project manager position. That's kind of a logistics position, and we're currently still filling that need in those roles with the FEMA funds and temporary staff, which will soon go away. So we hope to transition that work to this full-time position should this be extended. The rest of those positions are all currently filled.
So you're saying the public health manager is not filled?
No, that's the public health manager is me. That one is filled. It's a logistics position, which is
Project coordinator then you're talking about? Okay, all right.
And that's the only one that's vacant. All the rest are full.
Okay, and then, but how many other vacancies do you have in public health?
I don't know how many there are in all of public health.
I think Cheryl is probably madly looking up that number right now.
Okay, I mean, I'm just, it's like.
I think, I mean, my sense is that public health is more fully staffed than it's been for quite some time. I don't know the exact number, but I think Cheryl will get that to you while we're still
Okay,
at
go
the
ahead.
table.
That's my question. Thank you.
And I know that the teams that we work closely with that have had quite a bit of turnover, like the communicable disease and advancement and protections teams, are more fully staffed now, allowing us to create those partnerships and transfer some of that. So work, that workload between teams, which is really helpful for them to have, staffing in a different way.
I did notice that last week, the Friday monthly COVID update got switched to no longer being called COVID, and it's now going to be quarterly. Is that kind of what your email had said, Janice? That was, the Friday 1 o'clock meeting?
Yeah, the executive council that was called the COVID Response Executive Council is going to be maintained as an executive council. We are shifting it into a recovery-focused council, but we are keeping a quarterly connection with that group of people so that, again, what we learned from COVID is having a group of people organized both internally and in the community that are able to quickly respond to emergencies turns out to be a really important thing. So we want to maintain some of the core structures that support that to the extent that we can without overcommitting people's time. So when we met with that group last week, the folks who did attend agreed that it was still an important group to convene and keep meeting regularly, but we're going to step that down to a quarterly meeting. And of course, if we need to increase frequency in response to an emergency, we can do that.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Cheryl.
Good morning, Commissioners. Cheryl Smallman, Business Officer with Health Services. Public Health has 91.7 full-time equivalent staff, and 7.7 are currently vacant, so that's an 8.5% vacancy rate today.
Okay, so you would add those two together for the, so we're talking it's.
It would be 91.7 less the 7.7,
Okay.
so 91.7.
91.7 are already there. And so we're talking about adding, what, 6 or 7 more to public health?
91.7 total public health FTE filled or vacant. So the new FTE would add 1.
So the 91.7 includes the 7 FTE.
Because they're already
Correct.
approved through 23. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
And so that number will actually go down because we're going from about 15 FTE currently. And then in March, we lose, I think, 4 people. And then in June, there'll be another 4 that are, I think it's 4. Anyway, yeah, we'll be stepping down over the next little while and then have this core staff continue after that. And then continue to step down over like.
And they are in that 91.7 number then?
Correct.
And in the past, when we've talked about the COVID response team, there were temps and there was contractors. So when you're just, Emily, when you were just talking about the ramp down, are those the temps that are going away, or are those other limited duration positions that are going away? Or?
So they are a combination of those things. In March, the ones that I'm speaking about that Cheryl has calculated in that 91.7 are limited duration employees. We still do utilize temporary employees as well through that FEMA funding that we have for vaccine administration at our vaccine clinics. We currently don't have any ARPA-funded temporary employees, which we did at this time last year. We probably had 40 ARPA-funded employees that were doing various things. So we've stepped that down over the last year, and then the last of those employees were laid off in November. And now we're only have a few FEMA-funded temporary employees, and then this number is actually the limited duration, like county employees that we're talking about here.
So that bar chart that shows the kind of shrinking bars, or that captures all, at least the temps, but maybe not contractor capacity as well.
So the temps and contractors are kind of the same.
Okay.
So
Okay.
we have county employees that are limited duration, and then we have temps and contractors in a second. The bar chart does capture both of those because I thought it was important to kind of
Right.
show
Yeah.
the amount of people that we were utilizing to where we are now.
Yeah. Yeah, I
And
mean-
that's an equivalency. It's not the actual number. I mean, we had way more people, but their hours
Right.
were equivalent to that many FTE in those time periods.
Yeah,
And that-
looking at that bar chart, I mean, that's a dramatic ramp down, and I was a little concerned about that at first, but having heard about how you're how you're covering everything, and basically responsive to the needs of the day, whether it be a whole bunch of people wanting to get vaccinated, like this is happening right now, or a surge in cases. It's that was helpful to understand and to make me more comfortable with that, watching the ramp down.
I would also include that we have a really robust volunteer corps that we're still using that was kind of established during the mass vaccination clinic. I think probably some of the people in this room volunteered at the mass vax clinic as well. We continue to use those, and we did some re-engagement in the month of October and had 75 different individuals in October that were volunteering at our clinics. A lot of those people have been, really volunteering often over the entire time since the mass vaccination clinic, but it's really something that's important to us, and we want to continue in public health to have that kind of reserve so that when things do happen, they're already trained and screened and ready to go, so we can ramp up and ramp down using those people that are definitely there. I mean, our temps have also been that way for us, but we understand that they have been very dedicated and flexible and amazing to have, but we can't continue that forever. So we have to find that balance between those different pools of people and resources.
Yeah, and when I went in to get my second booster finally last week, I went to the Larkspur mass vaccination clinic, and I was amazed at how many, I was asking people around, and I was amazed at how many of the people who were there making that thing run were volunteers, and there were hundreds of people there seeking vaccination. So it was really amazing that we have such a depth of volunteer support, and to me it reemphasizes how important it is to have enough staff support that we can continue to leverage all of that community goodwill out there.
Well, and you have to have staff to manage either temps or volunteers as well. I mean, it's a big job to keep people engaged and communicate with them and all of those things. But we really, like Janice said about the Executive Leadership Council, we want to take those lessons learned, collaboration, communication, and move those forward as we, kind of go into this recovery phase and not lose those connections and those structures that were built specifically for COVID, but kind of shift them to this broader kind of focus.
Yeah, I really like this idea of a health emergency preparedness and response team, kind of in the longer run.
Commissioner DeBonne, did you want to add anything?
Yes, I do. One question. So the next couple quarters, according to this chart in the memo, show that hatched line above the resources required for 2 quarters. Can you explain what's the thought there, what that's showing?
He's referring to this.
So that's the projected cost analysis from moving forward. So we know what we spent in the months, the quarters previous, but from here on out, it's a projection. And there's a couple of reasons. One is vacancies, which we know we've had, and we know we can't necessarily fill every position all the time. The second one, I think Cheryl would say, is our FEMA funding does go through the end of this through June, so we have some flexibility in what we're going to spend there, and that's based on demand, right? Clearly, if our vaccine clinics are busy, we continue to have them. If they are slower, then we will, ramp those back depending on what that demand and the need is in the community, which also creates some variability, which, we make estimations based on that.
In addition, we do anticipate continuing to work with and move forward with the Franklin shelter, which would be an expense that would hit potentially next quarter, and then if extended the quarter after. So I've assumed those materials and supplies and other contracts are also going to be expended this fiscal year and then phase out thereafter.
So that
So having that hatched line above the resource requirement is kind of a reserve, unknown expenditure scenario. Is that true?
It is a both and. So yes, it is the unpredictable nature of some of the expenditures, and then expenditures that aren't necessarily represented here that Cheryl just described related to overseeing the Franklin shelter responsibility that we still have right now.
Understood.
So
Great,
the number
thank you.
you're showing, Cheryl, for temporary staff, the 508,000, do we expect, is that number going to change then? Are you saying we are done with temporary, or we're having temporary funded through FEMA now?
We do have temporary staff funded through FEMA that would continue until that funding phases out. Right now, we have the bandwidth of about $200,000 to extend through June. And if that contract ceased, we would have 60 days notice at that point in time.
And that comes from FEMA?
Yep.
Well, I like this plan. It's a good idea to, utilize some of these resources. This is one question. The first motion talks about acceptance of 574,000. Is this really health reserves or ARPA reserves allocated for health that we're allocating from the board?
Correct.
This is like the whole ARPA pool, I think.
So what's left in the balance then?
Yeah, so in the balance right now, there's $412,000 and $217 total. But that does include reserves which was originally given for a community health bucket of $2.3 million, which is still in there. And certainly this would be eligible under this. Health is asking for $579,000 approximately of that $2.3 million, which is remaining. So it would drop the balance to about $1.7 million in that community health services bucket for ARPA.
Well, and I'm supportive of that, especially with this ramp down plan. So I'll move approval of $574,696 from ARPA reserves for the purpose of the COVID-19 recovery within the Health Services Department.
I'll second.
Is there any further discussion?
Is that the right number?
It says 574,000. I think you said 594,000 or something, didn't you?
79?
Yeah, you
I think
said,
it's at 79, yeah, but
What's
the
it?
$574,696 would be the motion.
okay.
But I agree with that amount.
Second. Second.
Okay. Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair votes yes. Okay, then,
Second motion.
Sorry, my battery died, so I cannot see the motions right now.
okay, so now we have the second.
I got it. I'll move approval of resolution 2022-076 to extend 7 limited duration positions and create 1 new limited duration position for public health educator 1 position within the Health Services Fund.
Second.
Further discussions? Yeah, I want to know about this new position we're creating. Why do we need this position?
So this is a transition. This position will be, basically right now we have a whole team of, I think we spoke about this a little bit, 5 community health workers. They speak different languages and they go out in the community and educate on COVID. Currently that's funded through FEMA funding and they're temporary staff, so they're not county employees, they're this kind of temporary staff. We hope to transition that community health worker model into this 1 new public health educator to continue that work and those relationships and all that kind of foundation that we have built. So basically this is taking that temp kind of staff and transitioning it to a person who works full-time in that kind of community health worker role.
I think the piece that I would add to that is that this is sort of related to the larger concept of the fact that managing hundreds of volunteers, handfuls of temps is a task in and of itself. So bringing this work into 1 position that lives on a team, comes to work every day, is well-versed in all of the activities of the job is just a much easier way to manage that work in the community, given that we're shrinking the capacity of the team. So that's the other part of kind of the thinking behind that.
So, but the project coordinator, what are we missing there?
So the project coordinator position is currently, again, being filled with temporary staff that are funded through FEMA.
Okay, it's a temporary person
So
is
it's
doing
a
it.
temporary person is doing that work, going to clinics, setting up chairs and moving supplies and talking to the people and making sure that the snow is all of that kind of logistical, considerations that goes with clinics, but also building space and supply management and all of that stuff, so that we would also don't want to lose that capacity and that, ability to get that stuff done, both within health services and our teams. So that's that project coordinator position.
So when you said it wasn't filled, but it was filled, it was just filled with a temporary person?
Correct. We have a temporary person in that role, but that position number is vacant.
Okay. Does that person want to transfer over then?
We're still working on the position description, finalizing it for that role, so they'll probably make a decision about whether or not to apply based on are successfully getting a job description for the role on the books. So that one is in process. That's part of why it's remained vacant, because we've been working through what's the appropriate thing to call this role, what's the appropriate level in the organization. So we're working through that with HR right now.
Okay. Okay, back to the vote then. Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Okay, and the chair votes yes.
Thank you, commissioners.
Thank you. Okay, item number 13. I think I see some people from 911. Sarah, how's your number with unfilled? Is it any better?
We have 2 coming in January, but we are losing 1 for retirement.
Oh, okay. We got to get down to like, what, 4? Okay, great. Thank you for joining us.
Chair Dara, before we get started, if we could make sure we convene as the governing board.
Oh.
County 911.
Surely. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yes, we are reconvening as the governing board for 911 of Deschutes County. Should that have said it on our agenda?
It should.
Okay, all right. We'll make sure that doesn't happen again.
Good morning, Commissioners. Sarah Crossway, 911 Director, and
Jonathan Spring, Manager, Technical Services.
Thank you, Jonathan.
we are here today for approval on our Noble 911 agreement for our upgrade to our 911 phone system. This is about every 7 years we'll see you for this. We went and did demos with vendors, and out of that we selected our current phone vendor. What this means is we had a bit of a savings. You'll see when I came before you guys in our budget process, I budgeted $1.5 million in 710 for our phone system upgrade. For the duration of the 7 years with our upgrade, it's the 1.9. That includes, as you see below in our impacts, we actually get the reimbursement from Oregon Emergency Management for the first amount is the $542,000. That is for some of the hardware, and then we also and maintenance, and then we will get a $32,000 reimbursement every year for the 7 years of the phone system.
So $734,000 you're going to get back. Yeah. Okay.
So at this point, the difference of what we did 7 years ago, we did the full upgrade, which was everything. Lots of training, a big new system for the staff to learn. This time, we're doing a software upgrade and refresh, and our staff are very excited that it's not going to be a huge process, a learning process, something new. So that's always a blessing.
We must look for our blessings somewhere, right? Good. We got to keep your staff as happy as possible.
That's my goal.
Yes.
Okay. Do you guys have any questions for us?
All right. Well, Commissioner DeBonne.
This looks like it's just huge software costs here, isn't it? That's what the big picture is.
There is a hardware component.
Subscriptions and software.
So the hardware that's running the existing system is also 6 years old. So we're replacing software and hardware with this upgrade.
Is it a bigger part of software though? It looks like. Maybe I'm just not seeing the big picture, but yeah, this is. My point is, it's interesting. You know, a telephone is a telephone, but there's a lot of software behind it too.
Yes, absolutely. And being a 911 system, there's a little more complexity in how those calls are routed and queued and everything else for how it rings on the floor. So, if you were to compare this,
Is this
to,
all
say,
on
the administrative
site?
system, it's different.
Is this all on site,
It
or
is.
is this
Yep.
remote support, remote computers even?
It has that capability. We don't have that worked into our operations plan right now. But what we have before you also includes our backup center portion of this as well. So there's fair level redundancy between Bend and the future Redmond site.
Well, that's a good reminder. Yeah, that's a capacity we're adding to it then too.
Correct. Yep. It's including the expanded console count at the backup center.
Great.
Will they have to add an elevator to that up for you guys to be upstairs?
Yes. Yeah, that's in our costs.
Right. I know. I was thinking that. Any other questions, comments?
What would you think about being in the courthouse? The 4th floor. There's already an elevator there.
I heard there's going to be some space.
No further questions.
Okay, is there a motion?
I'll move approval of chair signature of document number 2022-948, agreement with Noble 911 for upgrades to the county 911 phone system.
And I will second it.
Any further discussion? Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Thank you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thank you.
Sorry, we're just running behind. All right, item number 14.
Also, if we could just make it clear that we're reconvening as the.
Oh, that's right, we are reconvening as Deschutes County. Thank you very much, 911.
Dan Emerson, Budget Manager. So in June of 2022, we adopted the fiscal year 23 Deschutes County fee schedule. Health Services is here today to discuss amending the fee schedule for some health services fees. I've attached Exhibit A in the agenda. Anything with red on there is the new proposed fee, and my colleagues are here from Health Services to discuss those fees if you have any questions.
Great. Cheryl Smallman, Business Officer with Health Services, and I'm joined by my esteemed colleague, Ariel Samuel, who's Contracts and Revenue Manager for Health Services. So in November of 2022, the Center for Medicaid Services approved Oregon Health Authority's request to increase behavioral health rates an average of 30%. Some of those fees changed, some of them didn't. Some doubled even, and like I mentioned, some made no change. The changes were primarily in the outpatient mental health rates specifically. So the new rates that will be available to Deschutes County to bill towards will be starting in January of 2023. And some of the approved fees for the fiscal year 2023 fee schedule were adopted at a rate that's lower than what we could actually receive. So we are requesting that the fee schedule be amended to allow us to bill in that rate. It should be noted that with the Oregon Health Plan and third-party insurance providers are the primary recipients of these bills and the billed charges, and uninsured clients are charged fees based on a sliding scale. Ariel, anything you'd like to add?
No, I think that about covers it. I mean, typically you would see billed rates that do normally exceed the actual reimbursement rate, as you probably would notice on your own personal claims and EOBs. So this is a really unique scenario where the Medicaid rates that have been approved are actually less than the fees that we're charging. So we're just looking to maximize the reimbursement as we're entitled to do.
Well, I think it's great that we can capture more reimbursement and recover a greater share of our actual costs for providing services. So
yeah, absolutely.
I'm supportive of moving forward with this.
Mr. DeBonne, do you have any comment?
No comment. I can see we're just aligning with the approved fees available to us. So at this time, I'll move approval of Resolution 2022-078 to amend the FY23 Deschutes County fee schedule and adopt the revised FY23 health services fees.
I'll second.
Any further discussion? Mr. DeBonne, or did you have something?
Yes.
I mean, this says this is a public hearing. I mean, do we need to go through more formal public hearing type procedures associated with this item?
We should open it up for public comment. I don't think there will probably be any, but we should, yes.
Okay. Public comment? Is there any public comment in the room? Stephanie, are there any raised hands on Zoom? Okay, so I will close public comment and ask for our vote then.
So yeah, I'll support proceeding with the motion.
Thank you, Commissioner
Acknowledging
DeBonne.
after a public hearing.
And Commissioner Chang, you will?
Second. Yeah.
Okay. No further discussion. Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you for joining us. All right, item number 15.
Good afternoon. Eric Kropp, Deputy County Administrator.
And Cheyenne Purrington, Director of the Coordinated Houseless Response Office.
This item is an IGA establishing the Coordinated Office on Houselessness. The board will recall that House Bill 4123, which established the 8 pilot programs in the state of Oregon, required participating pilot programs to enter into an IGA between the participating local governments. So for Deschutes County, that means the county and the 4 cities within Deschutes County. This summer, the draft IGA came to the Board of County Commissioners. The county commissioners conceptually approved the IGA, and then it went to the 4 cities. Each city approved the IGA without any changes, so we are back before you with the draft IGA, seeking your approval. Again, the IGA establishes the board of directors. It discusses the role of the executive director. It sets up the office structure and establishes an advisory panel.
So, Eric, my question is then on page 3 of 6, when it says it says C, Lapine will, D, Sisters will, and E, Redmond will. Nothing was put in there.
Yes, I looked at that. Good catch. The verbiage that was approved by the cities is that those cities will assign a staff liaison to the board of directors. So we'll add that language.
Okay, that's what their responsibility will be then?
Yes.
Okay, so that language will be added?
Yes.
Okay, I know, I was going like, well, it seems like something might be missing.
So at this point, all 4 cities have approved this IGA. Were there any questions or concerns that came up from the cities when
There weren't
this was
any
presented?
changes, were you, at any of the meetings? I know some of it was before you were hired.
I wasn't from
So-
conversations. I've understood that every entity was comfortable with the language. It's relatively generic and establishes a framework to work within, which is already underway.
Right. Yeah. I heard that they all approved it. I was just wondering if any things came up that people were wondering about or wanted to, unpack later after the IGA is signed or anything like that.
I didn't hear any feedback from the cities or the city managers about that.
I think given the new nature of this office, there will naturally be some evolution, and so that's where having some structure is helpful with, keeping in mind that it will evolve, and that's the goal.
And I do know we will be having a meeting in January.
Yes, and we'll be reaching out to, the city of Redmond will need to appoint a new member. And we'll double check on the other members to make sure that.
I believe Andrea will remain in Sisters.
And
So.
Colleen Scott has rotated out, so.
Okay, so it'll be 2. We reach out to the city manager of Lapine.
The advisory panel, so that's discussed in this IGA, we haven't done anything to assemble an advisory panel yet.
That's correct. Yeah, the board of directors have met once. They'll have the second meeting in January, and one of the first orders of business will be to develop an advisory panel that is made up of service providers and experts in the field of houselessness.
And part of what I'll be working on before that meeting to provide in advance will be an administrative plan for the office, which is sort of separate and apart from the strategic plan. That document is also a working document and will evolve, but the administrative plan will provide, I think, transparency about how the office will conduct its business, from purely just a meeting compliance and requirement, for the pilot, scheduling meetings, engaging different panels and groups.
And the panel does meet monthly and the board meets quarterly?
That's my understanding, and I think it's open for as I said, evolution if there's interest.
It says, yeah, quarterly or monthly, so, okay. Well, it says shall occur monthly for the panel in the IGA. So, all right. Commissioner DeBonne, any comments?
Well, this is the, paperwork associated with putting the coordinated office together in partnership with the cities and the county. So, this is the business case of it. I'm still, as I say, you've heard me talk a little bit about what are we really doing here? As in, is there action going to be happening? We want to help businesses thrive in a downtown core. We want safety for our citizens and services offered to people that are needed for help. Yeah, we'll see where it goes from here.
Great. Commissioner Chang, did you have any further comments?
No further questions.
Okay, is there a motion then?
I'll move approval of County Administrator's signature of document 2022-973 to establish a coordinated office of houselessness in conjunction with the cities of Bend, Lapine, Sisters, and Redmond.
Thank you.
And I will second it.
Thank you, Commissioner DeVon. Any further discussion? Commissioner Chang?
Yes.
Commissioner DeBonne?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Okay.
Very much.
Thank you very much for joining us, and this is good. Making progress. Okay, I believe Cody, are you on? Hello, I see him.
I'm here.
Thank you,
Sorry.
Cody.
As it was promoting me as a panelist there, I was cut off there, so I didn't hear you after you introduced me, but I assume it's my turn now.
It is now your turn. We're only an hour behind, and thank you for being there in the background.
All right. Okay, well, for the record, Cody Smith, County Engineer, Deschutes County Road Department. And board, I'm here now this afternoon to talk to you about the right-of-way resolution for the US 97 Lower Bridge Way to Northwest 10th Street, also known as the Terrebonne Project. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. Give me one moment. Okay, and just confirming you can all see my screen there?
Yes, we can. Thank you, Cody.
All right. So again, before you this morning is resolution number 2022-069 concerning the right-of-way for the US 97 Terrebonne project. With this resolution, there are 37 total right-of-way files that are identified for the county road improvement. The right-of-way necessary for the county road improvements as part of this project. If I recall correctly, there's 48 total right-of-way files for the project that were identified by ODOT. So the other 11 were pertaining strictly to the state highway, are not part of this resolution. So 12 of those files include permanent right-of-way dedications. 10 of those files include permanent easements or permanent easement parcels, such as slope easements, easements for stormwater facilities, and then in some cases, permanent easements for existing sidewalks that exist currently on private property that will be kind of incorporated into the project. In addition, there's also 31 files that include temporary work easements for driveway connections, construction work area for sidewalk improvements, those sort of things. Those files that just include those temporary work easements, I'm not really going to go over those today, but those are included in this resolution. I'm going to use our time today to just talk about the permanent right-of-way impacts. So with this resolution, what this resolution does is it memorializes the public necessity for the right-of-way acquisitions. And it also will authorize ODOT to conduct these right-of-way acquisitions on the county's behalf, which was previously agreed upon under our right-of-way services agreement, which was adopted by the board earlier this year. I do want to note that ODOT, is there a question there? I'm sorry.
No, someone's just coughing.
Okay. I do want to note that ODOT right-of-way staff has made contact and been in communications with all these property owners. So all these property owners are probably to different degrees, but are aware of the project and the impacts to their property. So we'll kind of look at this in different areas of the project, starting with the US 97 Lower Bridge Way interchange. First file, we'll look at file number 2, the Doty property. I'll note no relation to our road department director, Chris Doty. So this is by far, in terms of the county road impacts, this is one of the more impacted properties.
Real quick question. Is this executive session type discussions?
No.
This is not, no. I guess I can clarify that. We aren't going over valuations or offers for these property owners. These are just the actual impacts of these property owners. This is a little unique because this is, we're gonna, subject to the board adopting this resolution, we're handing this off to ODOT. And then ODOT's going to, the next step for ODOT is to begin the appraisal process here. And so all the remaining steps in the right-of-way process will be in ODOT's hands.
All right. So these are the design, footprint, right-of-way acquisition needs.
Correct.
But not the business of it. We're going to hand that off to ODOT. Got it.
Correct. We're not talking about any prices today. Yep. Those are the kinds of things we would.
I was just worried that was coming next on the next slide.
Okay. So anyways, first impacted property, and in general, kind of the most impacted property in terms of permanent right-of-way needs for the county road system, just with the proximity to the new interchange and the frontage there to Lower Bridge Way. So about a little over an acre total of impacted right-of-way here for the entire property. About a quarter acre of that is just for the county road impacts here. Next is a very small triangle for the Terrebonne Estates Homeowners Association. This is the property where their mailbox cluster resides. Fairly small acquisition there. Also, even much smaller acquisition, hardly even noticeable on the screen there, from the neighboring property owned by the Smiths, no relation to myself. Now we're going to the east side of the interchange here. The property owned by the Sawyer Family Trust. We've got a combination of a right-of-way dedication area here of about 0.03 of an acre. Coupled with a permanent slope easement and a temporary construction easement. To the south of that, at the Terrebonne Congregation of Jehovah's Witnesses Church, similar deal here, small permanent right-of-way dedication area, about 0.01 of an acre, coupled with a permanent slope easement and then and some temporary construction easements areas on that property. So that's it as far as the county road right-of-way impacts around the interchange. So next we're going to look at the central business area there in Terrebonne, and the impacts we're going to look at here. Most of these are primarily around sidewalk construction, and in most cases actually where we're obtaining a permanent interest in property. It's where we're getting an easement for an existing sidewalk that exists out there that's currently on private property, and we want that to be within the public right-of-way. So very few actual right-of-way dedications in the central business area here, but we'll look at these property at a time. First one here, the Stott property. This is at 11th Street and E Avenue. This is just a slope easement for the widening of 11th Street and other improvements on 11th Street. Also a temporary easement for improvements to their driveway apron to connect that with the new road improvements. Next, kind of looking at this whole block here where the Oliver Lemons Market is located. Properties owned by Ferguson Family Properties, LLC. Most of this acquisition consists of temporary construction easements. There's one minor. It's real tough to see down there in the southwest corner of the property. There's a very small 24 square foot permanent right-of-way dedication area for sidewalk ramp improvements. On the north side of the property there's a 305 square foot acquisition for a permanent easement for a stormwater facility that will be located in that area. The rest of this is all temporary construction easements associated with driveway connections or construction of the sidewalk within the public right-of-way, but in fairly close proximity to the property line. So it gives the contractor some room to work there. More of the same here, just temporary work easement areas on that same property. Just there was 8 different parcels on this property, so listed them on 2 different slides. Moving on to the next one, this is in the northeast quadrant of the intersection 11th Street and C Avenue. This is there's a permanent drainage easement here on the Dexter property, coupled with a temporary work easement around that drainage area. Fairly minimal area here, but want to note that one. So next we're moving down to the block in between C Avenue, B Avenue, Highway 97 and 11th Street, where we've got, there's I think 4 different parcels here, starting with the parcel on the south portion of that block owned by High Cotton Land and Cattle. This is one of those cases where there's an existing sidewalk. When this property was developed, there was sidewalk improvements that had to happen, but for whatever reason, those sidewalks didn't get built in the public right-of-way. They got built on the private property. So instead of building new sidewalks in the existing right-of-way here, instead we're just going to buy permanent easements to effectively buy those existing sidewalks and incorporate those into the project. So that's what's depicted here. Next, we're moving over to the, this would be the southwest corner of that block. Another parcel also owned by High Cotton Land and Cattle. We actually do have a permanent right-of-way acquisition in this area, a very small one, just for the sidewalk ramp improvements at that corner. Otherwise, more of the same acquisitions of the existing sidewalk that's there, and then a temporary work easement area for some of those sidewalk improvements and the new driveway connection out to 97 in this case. Next, kind of looking at the larger portion of this block here, the property owned by West Coast Property Management. This includes the property that the pump house resides on. This is a similar deal. Most of this is a permanent easement acquisition to purchase the existing sidewalks that exist there, generally within the roadway prism, but that aren't currently located within public right-of-way. Moving on.
Question.
Yes.
So when acquisition of a sidewalk like that, is that going to be a non-standard width on the right-of-way then? Or were those put in place, for a standard width of the right-of-way, is the center line out to X amount of feet?
It is going to be a non-standard width, although technically we're not purchasing these sidewalks as a right-of-way dedication. We're purchasing them as a permanent easement, or ODOT is rather, really for the sake of how we implement jurisdiction over that. There's no difference in that. But yeah, in general, I mean, there's going to be a lot of non-standard right-of-way widths here to accommodate stormwater facilities and retrofits to existing sidewalk and sidewalk returns to accommodate, to deal with accessibility issues, those kind of things. So yeah, in general, there's going to be a lot of this around Terrebonne.
So there may be a block that is going to be off, the sidewalk's going to be offset, the width of the sidewalk from block to block. Like if the next sidewalk is put in it won't be put in on the inside of somebody's property line. It might be put on the outside of a property line.
Well, so the ramps where it cross the street are certainly going to line up. But yeah, but beyond that, we will have some areas where sidewalk jogs and gets around. And I think we'll kind of get to that so you can see where that is. It kind of makes sense. But yeah, so none of that's going to happen actually within the road crossing. The sidewalks will line up at those locations. But yeah, there will be some jogs in the sidewalk to accommodate just kind of these existing conditions. So next one real quick, this is a very small permanent right-of-way acquisition and some temporary work easement for the southwest corner of the intersection of Highway 97 and C Avenue, where the Terrebonne Wagon Coffee house is, or drive-through coffee facility is. Next, so now we're on the block that's south of B Avenue. This is where the Red Point climbing store is, or some other businesses located in that business park there. Some very small permanent right-of-way dedications on the corners here, again, kind of just associated with those acquisitions necessary for upgrading the sidewalk ramps for accessibility. For accessibility improvements. Commissioner DeBone, to what you were just speaking about, you can see some examples here where you'll see those jogs in the sidewalk once we get beyond the crossings and the curb ramps.
That's exactly what I was starting to see, yes.
Let's see, moving on. Now we're, this is the Daryl Ferguson Living Trust property that's at the northeast corner of the intersection of 11th Street and A Avenue. There's a very small permanent drainage easement area here and some temporary work area required for a drainage facility that will primarily be located in the existing right-of-way, but there's going to be some slopes there where a little bit more room's necessary. And then obviously during construction, some temporary work area needed to construct that facility. Now we're at the intersection of 11th Street and Highway 97, and right there on that gore there towards the south end of town on the Sunspot property. About a 531 square foot right-of-way acquisition necessary for that new wraparound connection for 11th Street to northbound 97. And then lastly, in terms of the right-of-way acquisitions for the central business district here, another small dedication area on this property owned by the Ferguson Family Trust. This is on the south side of 11th Street at the 11th 97 intersection there. Again, to accommodate that new geometry for the 11th Street connection and kind of transitioning into the chicane geometry on Highway 97. Just south off the screen here, which we'll look at that in a moment. Okay, and then in terms of the county road improvements, kind of the last area is Smith Rock Way, and I'm only going to look at one of the files on this because except for the one file, which is the Terrebonne Grange Hall, all the other acquisitions along Smith Rock Way are temporary construction easements, primarily needed for making the driveways behind the new sidewalk match into the existing road or to the new road improvements. So I won't cover every one of those because very few permanent right-of-way impacts on Smith Rock Way as part of this project. So with the Grange Hall, there is a small permanent dedication area to accommodate the new right turn lane and sidewalk that will be built along Smith Rock Way there. Beyond that, there's also need for a stormwater drainage facility that will be facilitated with a permanent easement. And then beyond that, there's some temporary work area necessary for this. And I do recognize this looks fairly impactful to at least a portion of the Grange Hall's parking here. This has been fairly closely coordinated. ODOT has been working with the Grange Hall on this, and my understanding, anyways, is the the Grange Hall representatives are pretty supportive of this. This part over here, it's not really a good parking area for them as it is anyway, so they didn't really feel like they're losing much there. So lastly, I'll just want to share the kind of the south gateway portion of the project, and there are some right-of-way needs, some fairly big right-of-way needs associated with the improvements on Highway 97 and the new chicane geometry for northbound 97 there at the south end of the town. Again, these are not part of this resolution that the board has taken action on, but I just wanted to show this as well. So we've shown the entirety of the project here. So last slide I'll share on this anticipated project schedule. So right now, obviously, we're in the preliminary engineering phase for this project, us and ODOT, I should say. That's anticipated to continue through August of 2023. Right-of-way acquisition phase is just kicking off. That's also expected to continue through August of next year. Current schedule presently anticipate bid advertisement for the project in the fall of 2023, shooting for bid opening in November 23 with construction starting soon after. And right now anticipating this to be about a 1.5 season project. So right now anyway, showing completion in June of 2025. We'll note all this is subject to change though. So with that, I will stop talking and pass it back to the board chair, and happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Thank you, Cody. Thank you for that.
So Cody, with this resolution, basically, we're indicating what acquisitions we want to see happen for county road systems, but ODOT is going to negotiate those?
That is correct. Okay. ODOT is negotiating those, and technically ODOT is paying for those. So we the county, presently we're committed to $10 million in on this project. As it sits right now, none of that money technically has been earmarked towards right-of-way costs. There's $2.2 million that is earmarked towards preliminary engineering costs, and the remaining $7.8 million is earmarked towards construction costs. So technically speaking, with that, ODOT's actually ODOT either through the House bill funds that are associated with the project or some of the other funding that they've brought into the project are paying for these right-of-way costs.
Thank you.
Commissioner DeBonne, did you have any comments?
It's going to be a great package. My first thought is that just this packet will be of interest to people in the community. So hopefully, people are hearing about this, and go ahead and print it out. And this is the information about how it's going to be developed. So that's my thought. And great presentation, Cody. Thank you.
Cody, can you actually can you share the presentation with us? It's just a bit different than what our packet is.
Yeah, the packet's just is the resolution itself with the more technical surveying type math. But yeah, I will be PDFing this and sending it to Brenda, and I can copy commissioners individually if you guys want to copy directly also.
Yeah, it'll be part of the minutes.
Thank you so much.
And I did just want to speak to one thing Commissioner DeBonne said, that again, these properties identified here, ODOT's been pretty actively already working with these property owners. These property owners are, they're aware of what these impacts are and what's going to happen. They've already received their general notices months ago, coupled with lots of communication and visits from ODOT right-of-way staff. So as far as I know, there should be no surprises for those property owners.
That's good.
Well, and I'm just referring to individuals that'll be interested in the information. And because I just remember, there's people at Crooked River Ranch that want to know exactly what's going on, so there's just a greater community around this.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that drive through there.
Okay. Can we have a motion then? Does somebody have?
I'll move approval of resolution number 2022-069 to authorize negotiations for the acquisition of right-of-way needed for the US 97 Lower Bridgeway to Northwest 10th Street Terrebonne project.
And I will second it.
Okay, is there any further discussion?
Nope.
Mr. Chang?
Yes.
Mr. Devon?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So thank you, Cody. Thank you.
Thank you.
I do believe that part of our funding, didn't we do something with like the feds where if we did something, we actually save like 1.3 million or something on this project?
That's correct. We're not saving that much, and I apologize, I don't remember exact figures off the top of my head, but we are going to utilize some of our surface transportation, or our current balance, and when I say current, I actually mean current through the beginning of calendar year 2023, surface transportation block grant funding. We're going to allocate that to this project, which would keep it as federal funding, meaning in doing that, we won't lose a portion of that funding through the fund exchange process with ODOT to convert those to state funds. Hopefully that explained that enough.
Well, that helped. I knew there was something there that it wasn't 10 million that we were going to be doing. So thank you for joining us today.
Absolutely.
All right. And I'm glad it is a different Doty family, that we don't have to have a conflict of interest.
And a different Smith family, too.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. We could really wonder. All right. Do we have any other items? Mr. DeBone, do you have any items?
I'll be attending the Oregon Business Plan on Monday in Portland. That'll be, I think the governor-elect will be speaking, so I'm looking forward to, being with some of the leadership around the business community around the state.
Okay. Mr. Chang?
Yeah, I'll be in attendance as well.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, do we have any executives? Nick, do you have anything?
Whitney, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Staff wanted to connect with the board quickly under other items on a logistical question from Doug Riggs that's related to the upcoming legislative summit that's scheduled for December 16th. In the afternoon of that event, there is a panel discussion between COCO and local counties, and Doug has asked for one commissioner from Deschutes, Jefferson, Crook, and Wasco counties to participate and share local county priorities for the 2023 legislative session. And so we wanted to check in with the board on which commissioner might want to participate in that panel discussion.
And what time is it on the 16th?
1:10 p.m. is the scheduled time for that panel discussion.
Okay.
So I would assume that's a public meeting, as in if another commissioner wanted to be in the room, we'd be okay with that. So maybe there's a panel and then people that are attending.
Correct. I think that's our assumption as staff as well, and we will make sure that it's noticed on the board's schedule and calendar so that that isn't an issue. But I think for the purposes of the panel discussion, they were just looking for one representative.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
the 16th at 1, and we have, we're having that meeting that starts at 10 a.m. that day?
That's correct.
And so the meeting, and it says, according to my calendar, that's a 4.5-hour meeting. So this is within that.
Correct. This is part of that agenda, and I think this item was scheduled for later in the day to accommodate an earlier conflict that is no longer a conflict.
Oh, so you mean something got removed?
I think something got shifted to another day.
Oh, that's right, yes. Weren't we supposed to be in Sun River that day or something?
And the move to 10 allows whoever wants to participate to participate in the local government advisory committee meeting with AOC.
Great, all right. So I can do it at 1 if that's what helps.
Great.
So I mean, I'd be interested in doing it also, but so you're offering to be the panelist, Commissioner Dare?
I am.
And Commissioner Chang, would you be interested in being the panelist?
I would, but, that don't particularly, don't want to haggle about it, so.
Well, as I say, I'm in a spot where, yeah, it sounds like all of us we may be all be able to attend anyways.
Yes.
So I'll support Commissioner Darrow there, and then I may be in the room wanting to say something. I'll just acknowledge that.
Great, thank you, commissioners. We'll coordinate with Doug.
Okay, thank you. So do we have executive then?
We do.
We have real property E. Okay, so Stephanie, can we take a 3-second